Yep. Yes. Morning, lovely people. Welcome. 9th of February, at long last, this day has come. We've all been looking forward to it. Welcome. 9th of February, Place and Resources. Officers attending for our overall agenda. We've got Aidan Dunn, our Executive Director of Corporate Development. Jonathan Mayer. He is there. Jonathan Mayer, Director of Legal and Democratic, and Lindsay Watson, or Lovely Linz, as she's known in the trade, our Senior Democratic Officer. So just to remind everybody on the use of the microphones, but honestly, if you don't know now, you'll never, ever know. So just remember, only one microphone on at a time. I would like to pay a particular welcome to Jenny here, who's looking very gorgeous in the third row back. Attending with Councillor Borden. She's on work experience and she's going to be riveted probably by this morning's agenda. And today, Jenny, we got the four, I've decided we've got the 4 R's, not reading, arithmetic and all of that stuff. No, we're going to have robust debate. We're going to have lots of respect. We're going to be reflective and then we will recommend. So moving on. Jonathan, did you want to make a statement on declarations or not before we start? Oh.
Chairman, I'm happy to say something about the council tax item, the council tax premium item, if that would help members. So ahead of this report going to cabinet, I'll start again. A number of councillors have disclosed in their register of interests that they own additional properties in Dorset. They're not second homes as such. Councillors won't own second homes in the county in which they live. When we talk about second homes, the legislation, in fact, refers to dwellings occupied periodically. That's a little bit different. And because councillors who own additional properties, your circumstances might change and possibly lead to that property being legally categorised as a dwelling occupied periodically. I've advised councillors in that position who own additional properties in Dorset that they should withdraw when this item of business comes up on your agenda. Withdraw, not take part, not vote at all, but leave the room. I don't know that we've got any councillors in that position this morning, but if you are, if you declared that you own an additional property in Dorset, you should leave the room, please, when we get to that item. So I think, Chairman, the question is there anyone in that position?
Thank you very much. Moving on, item 1, apologies, Lindsay.
Chairman, apologies from Councillors Fry and Hope.
Thank you very much. Les is doing some good work in Africa at the moment. He flew out a couple of days ago. So on a recent meeting, I forgot to call somebody that put their hand up. So on that basis, I need a vice chairman just to keep a little eye on who wants to speak and in which order. So can I have a proposal, please?
Sherry Jesperson, Hillforts and Upper Tarrants Ward. I'd like to propose Councillor Val Pothcary.
Thank you very much. Actually, Val and I, it's perfect colour coordination, so I think that's going to work quite well. Can I have a seconder, please? Thank you very much, Councillor Coombs. Step this way, Councillor Pothcary. Right, moving on to item 2. We've got the minutes of the last meeting. Assuming everybody's read them, is everybody happy that they're signed as a correct record? Thank you very much. Declarations of interest. Councillor Coombe.
Thank you, Chairman. Following the advice from the legal officer, I declare an interest in the Second Homes Council tax paper and will be withdrawing from the chamber.
Thank you very much. Chairman's update. I really don't have one. Public participation, we've got a statement that has been received. It's available as a supplement to the agenda, and so you shall have seen that. So Katie Hale is actually going to address these points within her presentation on item 7. So, and I believe Tony Tuck will also get a written reply as well. So that will be dealt with. Item 6, questions from members. We don't have any. So, item 7, council tax premiums on second homes. We've got a recommendation that this will go to Cabinet on the 28th of February. So, presenting, we've got Katie Hale, our Head of Revenues and BEVs. So, Katie. Oh, sorry, Peter, would you like to come in? Come in.
Thank you, Chairman. Excuse me for standing, but as you know, I've got long COVID. I'm not infectious. But if I sit down, I start coughing. So this is not paying any more respect than I normally have for you. But I'm just struggling. I think it's probably worth giving some political background to this before the officers, Katie Hale and Stephen here, speak about it in more detail. For those members and for the members of the public watching and for the press, this came before the Cabinet meeting a week or so ago. And prior to the Cabinet meeting, I was in discussion with a number of members and owners of second homes and non-owners of second homes. And it became clear to me that this was quite a contentious subject and was also unclear because we're about to vote on something that assumes some content in the Levelling Up Bill, which has not yet been passed, has still got to go through its committee stages, and there is a very good chance certain elements of it will be changed. So we will have to revisit that. So any decision you make today, we make at Cabinet or we make at Council, will be in principle and we'll make assumptions. So after that, I decided that we should try and get this to go through an overview committee. And what I'm looking for today, please, if this doesn't sound too prescriptive, is the sense of this committee's view of this paper and any suggestions you've got either for questions we should ask government or changes, I'd like to know about it. So we deferred it from Cabinet. I asked you, and can I say thank you to you, Chairman, for agreeing it to come before this committee on very late notice. I'm very grateful. Thank you to the leader who agreed that it could be deferred to a later Cabinet. And thank you to the Chair, your delightfully coloured coordinated Vice Chair, who agreed, again at fairly late notice, and I'm very grateful for this, to actually move the full Council meeting we had in April to the end of March. Now, that may only seem a few days, but because Parliament rises at the end of March, we had to get our agreement prior to then. Otherwise, for reasons unknown only to lawyers and other people, our approval would have had to wait a year. So if we were to try and take advantage of it, but hadn't approved it till April, we would not have been able to take advantage of it in May the following year. So the whole thing is quite tricky, and that's why it's come to you. So I'm very grateful for it. I would like to say that the report brought to you for your consideration today highlights a very important new opportunity for us to apply 100% premiums on second home council tax liabilities. And Katie will talk today about some of the definitions currently in the legislation that form second homes, because the fact is, as is often the case, this isn't always clear, and you're going to have to take the assumption of both Katie and the legal officer whilst recognising that it might change. With over 5,000 second homes in Dorset council area, this would enable some significant additional benefits. So that's why this report's come for you today. Councillor Alford wrote to me some time ago saying, there is of course a concern, which I share with Councillor Alford, that whenever you bring effectively what you might call financial legislation, then lawyers and tax accountants then spend their time trying to find ways of avoiding paying it. Avoiding legally, I hasten to add. That's going to happen because you are talking about, a potential for many millions. We've quoted the figure of 9.5. I think it will be less because I think it may, have impacts. And again, this is something that I can't really ask officers to say. It may have impacts on people's behaviour. People may spend rather a lot of effort in finding ways of avoiding it. And you might argue that avoiding £1,000 on a second home worth rather more than that is slightly odd, but that's what happens. So people might do that. But it might change people's behaviour in terms of selling second homes and people using hotels and things like that. And you might consider that this is actually a positive benefit. Forget the financial benefit. You might consider this is a positive benefit. And I also want to really emphasise, and the officers can't add this as much as I would add this, there is a potential community benefit. I know a number of villages in my old district ward, and one of the jokes we had of one particular village was that I could get you a retired judge, but I couldn't get you any care workers, any teaching assistants, any plumbers, because all the houses were, during the winter, empty. Now, that's anecdotal, and I've probably exaggerated, but the fact is there is an argument that this second homes tax could encourage people to get rid of their second homes by whatever means and to spend their time down here in hotels or whatever. I've been written to by many people who say, I will not get rid of it, or if I do, I'll never come here again. Again, you have to believe that or not. So it's quite a difficult debate you're going to have, but it's really important because you are going to influence Cabinet and then full council. The report also highlights the proposed changes to the existing premiums charged on long-term empty properties, which currently starts at 2 years, and this hopefully report will confirm that this can be lowered to commence after only 1 year of a property remaining long-term empty and unfurnished. I commend this report to you. I am absolutely, passionately in favour of it because I think it will be good for Dorset. But I'm really keen that you as a committee add your comments, guidance to us so that we can go to Cabinet and we can go to full council. And again, I thank you for agreeing to take this at late notice. And my voice has stayed up. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Councillor Wolf, and we embrace this coming here. We're looking forward to our robust debate. So, Katie, take it away.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the opportunity to bring this paper to your attention today. So the report that you are looking at today is found on pages 9 to 14 of the report pack. I'm just going to take you through some fundamentals to just add some clarity as to some of those examples and definitions that Councillor Peter-Wolf has just referenced as well, just to try and aid the discussion this morning. So the report before you today sets out specific considerations which fall within the current Levelling Up and Regeneration Bill. The draft legislation sets out how each local authority are able to consider whether they wish to adopt policy to levy or to charge this new premium on those properties listed in as second homes for the purposes of council tax, and enables consideration for change to the already established premiums on long-term empty properties. This new premium will only apply to second homes, as the report states. The bill references these as dwellings occupied periodically, but to help and for council tax purposes, a second home is a property that is furnished and no one's sole or main residence. It's therefore important today to draw out that this new premium would not apply to other classifications of property. Any person who has a property registered on the council tax list in Dorset Council area will receive a bill, and that bill will already state clearly if that property is classified as a second home. Therefore, if you do not have a liability for council tax as a second home, such as perhaps a mobile caravan on a holiday site, which is covered by the site's business rates, this does not apply to that property. Most will recognise a second home to be a property that the owner, or perhaps family and friends, utilise at times, but they do not class this property as their main home or residence. Each council will maintain a list of properties that fit within either the council tax list and the other list that contains business rated properties for the purpose of taxation. The Valuation Office agency makes the decision as to which list each property belongs to. Use of properties can change, and the classification therefore then changes to reflect this. If, for example, a person currently had a second home in the Dorset Council area and they decided to let that property out, usually via an assured short-hold tenancy, it would no longer meet the definition of a property that is furnished and no one's sole or main residence, therefore a second home, as it would now become the main residence of the tenants letting the property, and they would become liable for the council tax. The Valuation Office, to support this, have introduced new rulings from the 1st of April this year. As mentioned in the report, they provide a more robust framework, ruling when a property that is being let out for self-catered holiday lets can and should either stay within the council tax list or move to the business rates list. To summarise, in England, these new tougher evidence standards will be that the property must be available for letting commercially for short periods that total 140 days or more in the previous and current year, and actually let for 70 days or more in the previous 12 months. Therefore, any property being used for this purpose but not meeting these standards will remain in the council tax list. I feel it prudent to highlight that exemptions to the premiums are not provided for, and therefore, as an example to reference, the matter raised in the public statement referenced and received regarding, on this occasion, chalet homes which cannot be occupied for the full year, the position is as follows. For the defined and permitted period of occupation, the property meets the criteria of a second home, being a property that is furnished and is no one's sole or main residence. For the required period of non-occupancy, the property may be granted a Class G council tax property exemption. So the exemption is found under those rulings and not as a disregarded category to this second home premium. So just to reiterate, for the required periods of non-occupancy, the property may be granted a Class G council tax property exemption, as the planning permissions in these rare cases stipulate a period of time where occupation is prohibited by law, and that's the key on those Class Gs. It must be prohibited by law, which would be evidenced. The council tax section are always supportive and helpful in providing advice and support, explaining why properties are within the council tax list and what the correct classifications are. All current explanations, definitions, full lists of disregards are available on the council's website. The second section of this report, as was referenced, reaffirms Dorset Council's already fully adopted approach to charging premiums on those properties listed as long-term empty and unoccupied. So just to reaffirm, these already exist, and these premiums are where a property remains unoccupied and empty, so that's substantially unfurnished for over 2 years, Dorset already charge 100% premium. A premium then of 200% may apply if the property has been unoccupied and unfurnished for between 5 to 10 years. A premium of 300% may be applied to a property that has been unoccupied and unfurnished for over 10 years. We do have properties in all three categories, just to clarify. I would just like to add that we have an exceptional housing standards team, and we work very closely on all unoccupied properties. We work very collaboratively to ensure we're working with the owners of these properties in a very active manner and supporting that. So that reaffirms the approach of charging a premium, but that's not really the ultimate aim. The ultimate aim is to actually make those properties useful. This second change in the bill is considering allowing authorities to commence this 100% premium to allow this to be adopted and applied after only 1 year now. So Dorset does already, like I say, maximise the current level of premiums within this area of taxation. So really, in summary, the aim of this draft legislation is primarily aimed to allow councils to raise additional revenue and to acknowledge the impact that second and empty homes can have on some communities. If the bill does receive royal assent, these options to highlight and reaffirm will only become available to billing authorities with effect from the 1st of April 2024 at the very earliest. Dorset Council do have the time of writing this report have 5,722 properties listed as second homes, and the report does highlight the potential additional revenue that could be achieved via this additional taxation premium. It is currently unknown what date the bill will receive royal assent, and therefore, as currently a full 12 months notice must be provided if the bill does not receive royal assent prior to the 31st of March this year, the earliest date changes could take effect would be delayed until at the earliest the 1st of April 2025 at this stage. So I hope this assists. I will hand over to my colleague to see if my colleague would like to add anything further at this time.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you for that. There's not a lot I could add in terms of Katie's.
Tell me who you are.
Yeah, sorry, I'm Stephen Ford, Corporate Director for Climate and Ecological Sustainability. So there's not a lot I can add in terms of that, very thorough sort of technical overview of our interpretation of how the legislation may impact. But I think I just wanted to set a little bit of the context about why we're in this particular process and some of the timings as well. So the Levelling Up and Regeneration Bill, as Councillor Wharf has already articulated, is currently working its way through the parliamentary process, and it's at the committee stage in the House of Lords at the moment. They are pretty much doing a line-by-line assessment of the proposed legislation. So this has the potential to not be a particularly quick process, and there's always the chances that there will be some amendments. But nevertheless, it is working its way through the system. I think it's worth making the point that if you look at the Levelling Up and Regeneration Bill in its entirety, its avowed aim is around reducing geographical disparities in terms of wealth and socioeconomic opportunity. So in a broad range, it's an enabling piece of legislation which has the potential for local areas to have additional powers and certainly additional flexibilities across a range of policy instruments. Within that broader context, this is where this particular focus on second homes and empty properties sits. The reason why we're obviously very keen that this is discussed today is that of all those particular potential enabling instruments, this is the one that has the potential to be time bound in terms of having to give the 12-month period of notice via a council resolution should it be decided that it's going to be adopted. So I think we were very keen, obviously, under the steer of Councillor Wharf, to ensure that this had the best possible opportunity to be aired and discussed, in good time, to make sure that we're in a position to, should we so decide to take advantage of that particular enabling part of this bill. So it was just to hopefully that helps set a little bit of context about why we're in the process that we're in. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. First to speak, we have Councillor Jesperson.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. Councillor Sherry Jesperson, Hill Fortune Upper Tarrants Ward, and thank you for that really helpful technical explanation, because it's a little bit nuanced, this, isn't it? So it's very helpful. Chairman, this is not as straightforward an issue as we might at first think. My starting position always is that I don't want to raise anybody's tax at all, ever. And I'm aware that this could impact on people in some of our villages, the villages I represent, who are well known and liked by their friends and neighbours and who do make a considerable contribution to village life. But on the question of the contribution to the impact on communities, I'm going to leave it to other colleagues for whom that's more pertinent to speak about that aspect. As a chair of planning and a member of the Housing EAP, I want to focus particularly on housing. And that's the context in which I think about this issue. We've got approximately 3,700 people on the housing register in Dorset, with a further 2,000 waiting to be assessed. We've got 235 households in temporary accommodation. And we've got 92 families living in bed and breakfast in Dorset. That's no way to live, and it's of enormous cost to Dorset Council's ratepayer to keep people in temporary accommodation and in bed and breakfast. And our housing team have estimated that we need 1,759, they're that good at it, 59 additional properties every year between now and 2031 just to house the people that we already know about. And 950 of these properties need to be affordable rent. These are really big numbers, and this is a really big challenge to Dorset Council and to the residents of Dorset. House prices in Dorset are on average 11 times the Dorset residents' wage. And so that's where I'm coming from when I'm thinking about this issue. To have a second home in Dorset when so many people have none is a privilege. I don't think any second homeowners would deny that. And I think it's reasonable that we should ask people to pay a little more for that privilege. And that's all this policy does. We're not banning second homes. We're not telling people how they can and can't spend their money on homes. We're just saying, would you mind paying a little more for the privilege of having a second home in our beautiful county? And I think it's important to remember that all we're doing at this point is giving ourselves this option for next year's budget or possibly the year after. Whether we actually do this, of course, will be subject to a really robust debate and budget cafe sessions next year. So we're not deciding at this point that that is what we're going to do. We're discussing whether we give Cabinet the opportunity for us to do that if we decide that it's a good idea. So in that context, I have to say, having started with hating the idea of raising anybody's tax and acknowledging the fact that this is going to impact on some of my residents, I feel it's difficult to justify not giving ourselves this option at this point so that we can have a good look at it when it comes to budget time this time next year. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Alford.
Yes, thank you very much. And I'm very happy to follow Sherry because I share your perhaps distaste for wanting to raise extra taxes. I would prefer to avoid them if I can. One thing I do recognise about this situation is that most members of the public support the idea of extra tax for second homeowners. And the reason really is quite clear because you can see the impact that second homes have on small communities. The vitality they have or used to have just disappears. And Councillor Wharf did mention some remarks I'd made about people changing their behaviour. If they change their behaviour and spend more time in their cottages in attractive villages, introduce a bit more life to the area, then I'm sure that that is something that we would all welcome. So if there is a reduction in the tax base, as I've previously suggested, that could well be a good thing. And I think when the financial forecasts are done, it's worthwhile reflecting on that. I think we are likely to want to have a view about how the money raised from such a tax is likely to be used. I understand Councillor Jesperson's suggestion of more money for housing, etc., etc. But I think we need to recognise that where second homes get well established in small communities, it impacts the services that can be produced there. These all of a sudden become less profitable than they used to be, no longer viable.
So if we can do something in terms of business generation to help small businesses through what hopefully might be a transition phase, that could be something that's useful to them. So I support the proposal. I was a bit concerned about the rules that are associated with them. I'd be interested to know from Katie Hale whether the rules that you've given us will apply in exactly the same way for all local authorities, because I think it probably is important that we can say, yes, we're applying exactly the same rules as everyone else. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Orford. As I understand it, other local authorities are discussing just this, and we are not alone. Is that correct, Katie?
Yes, that's absolutely correct. So this is national legislation that's being discussed. It is then granting the powers to each local authority to decide as and when they wish to have their discussions and what they want to consider, whether they do wish to support this incentive as well. And just to answer Councillor Alford's question, that yes, the rules are the same across the country, so these aren't specific to here in Dorset. The classification of second homes is a national classification.
Thank you. Councillor Rowe.
Councillor Rowe, and I'm Cole Hill and Wimborne Minster East Ward. I just wanted to have clarification when Sherry said that we would be discussing this in the next budget cafe. I understood that if it went through Cabinet and full council, that would, you know, and it was agreed for us to have the 100% council tax. I didn't think we would then have to discuss it in the budget cafe. Okay.
What's actually meant there is that when we come to review budgets in years to come, but I'm very happy to go to lovely Aidan sitting over there.
Good morning, everybody. Aidan Dunn, Executive Director for Corporate Development. So if I could just give a technical finance response and double check with Jonathan as Monitoring Officer. So at the moment, we haven't built any financial assumptions into our medium-term financial plan as a result of this policy. If you decide today to recommend this, then Cabinet considers it on the 28th. If Cabinet approve it, then it goes to full council at the end of the following month. And subject to the legislation, then we are in a position where the 100% will be automatically then enacted for the following year. So the budget debate will be whether to revoke that enactment during the year. So you're in a position where you'd be approving that it would be done, but there would be the choice, as every year, when setting a council tax policy, to revoke it. But the default assumption is that we'd do it. Okay. Could I just check with the Monitoring Officer, please?
Chairman, if I could just build on that slightly. So the status of the decision that the full council, subject to your recommendation and the Cabinet's recommendation, would be asked to make at the end of March, that will be a determination to introduce the premium on dwellings occupied periodically and the different period for empty dwellings. And that would be the council's decision then, and the expectation is that that would be followed through. But provided you did it before the 1st of April 2024, before the 1st of April 2024, you can revoke that decision, but unless it is actively revoked, you would be introducing the premium.
Councillor Wolfe.
Say that this is constitutionally not very pretty, because I'm a great believer in not binding the hands of our successor authorities, and bear in mind that the impact of this will be felt under the successor authority, whereas we will, and you're quite right to ask the question, we will end up effectively binding the hands of our successor authority. I happen to believe that's worthwhile doing, but I've spoken to the leader and a number of other people. I'm very keen that this goes through as an all-party, cross-party, not political decision, because I think that's really important in this particular case, because it would be, I think, very poor for a single party to push through a policy that may then have to be implemented reluctantly by another party or group of parties. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Tarr.
Well, I'm a Lib Dem, as you know, and I listened to Councillor Wolf's introduction, which I thought was extremely good. His anecdotal story is absolutely spot on. It's not just anecdote. As you know, I write the Coast Path books. I do whole of the South West Coast Path, and I go to villages. At one village in Devon, I wrote a draft and showed it to the local farmer. I always show it to somebody local to check through the facts. I said there's a pub at one end of the village and a shop at the opposite end, and it's only one field to cross from the Coast Path to get to everything you need in the village. And the farmer read it through, and so it's very good. He made some positive comments about things I could put in, interesting points. And then he said, oh, by the way, the pub's closing in September and the village shop is closing in September. So I said, well, don't these people spend money in the village? He said, oh, no, they ring up Tesco's before they come, it's delivered. And that's the end of the village economy. That's the end of jobs for the village shopkeeper, the village publican, all the hospitality trade that might be there. Completely dead village at the end of that process. So I think I can speak for the Lib Dems to say that we're in favour. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Councillor Pothecary.
Thank you. I just want to support really everything that's been said. I think, Gillingham and the villages that surround Gillingham is my ward. And so I think we're all really coming from the same place on this. I've certainly got villages where 30% of the dwellings are second homeowners, and they are dead during the week, and their contribution to the life and vitality of the community it really affects that vitality. And the village pubs, shops, and the primary schools actually have all become unsustainable. And this has been going on for some years, hasn't it? And we all bemoan the fact. So I do feel this is our opportunity to try and redress this balance a bit. So I shall very much be supporting the proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. Before Councillor Fry left for Shores Anew to do his charitable work, he did put a statement through and he's asked me to read it out, so I shall do so. Members, listeners, let's think about this paper for a moment. We are a council with a housing list of almost 6,000 people looking for a home, their only home. We have a portfolio holder leading a team developing a housing strategy to try and find more homes. We have a team looking at empty homes, trying to get them back into use. We are a council with a planning department trying to build affordable homes. We have a portfolio holder who has an ambition to build more affordable homes. We have over 5,700 second homes owned by people who can afford to own more than one home and be able to rent them out or use them on an occasional basis. The occupants of these properties do very little to support our economy. By purchasing each of the 5,700 plus second homes, individual buyers will have contributed towards increasing the price of each property, thereby making Dorset's houses more expensive, helping to push them out of the reach of so many prospective buyers. The extra revenue it is anticipated that will be raised by changing the system will be extremely valuable as Dorset Council seeks to balance the books and support our community. I am under no illusion that all the revenue will be generated and that many houses may still remain as second homes, but owners should be aware of their community responsibilities. So yes, I totally support this paper and ask anyone who does not examine their conscience and look at what they actually stand for. Now, do we have anybody else who wishes to speak? Councillor Borden? Yes? Yes?
Thank you. So I've got a few sort of items of feedback, mostly from Lyme Regis and Charmouth. So these are not necessarily my personal views, nor those of the Green Party. So we've had a lot of concern from the chalet and caravan owners whose leases prevent them from living in their properties for more than 8 months a year or 10 months a year, depending what agreement. And many of these people have owned these chalets and caravans for a number of years when they were, you know, the relatively modest price, and they are very concerned because they genuinely think they won't be able to afford to keep the homes that they love. And they're relatively local people. They're not coming from a long way. They're sort of Taunton way, for example. So I just wanted to sort of put a word in for them. I think one of the things that people have been concerned about is that this measure, whilst it would be really good to bring in additional income, and I would ask whether or not it's possible to ring fence that additional income in any way for potentially working on, there seemed to be a feeling from members about Dorset Council being more proactive in providing social housing, for example. So that was a question. I think the answer is probably no, but that would appeal more to people if they felt that it would be used for local people's benefit. But I think there's just a lot of concerns about this in itself. It doesn't address the issue of the fact that housing is so unaffordable. Maybe it would do over a period of time, but there are always going to be people who are able to afford to buy the home. So even if the second homers feel they can't keep them and they sell them, then there will be others coming in and doing them up for Airbnbs or holiday lets, which is a bigger problem, certainly in our neck of the woods. It's the properties being bought and turned into businesses purely for holiday letting that's almost more of a problem. But as I say, it's not my personal view nor that of the Green Party. I just wanted to make those views known.
Thank you very much. Councillor Wolfe.
Thank you, Councillor, for that. Understand your concerns. Chairman, I wrote to you, I've written to you a number of times on this subject. And one of the things, two things I suggested. One is I don't think you can tie the hands of the finance people for how they will organise the budget when we get there in a year or 2 years' time, because, you know, who knows what might happen. But what I do think, and I discussed this with you, Chairman, is that you might care to recommend a detailed analysis of the effectiveness of this second homes tax to see, and this takes the points that have been raised earlier, to see just how much we do raise, how much is going to be avoided, what the impact is, because this is much more than just about money, and I think we're all agreed on that. This is about actually trying to change people's behaviour. If we make a bit of money on the side, that's very helpful and we can use that. But I think we need to just not take any precipitate action because, you know, although my erstwhile financial colleague has said he believes 9.5 million is a reasonable estimate, I have to say I don't. I think there will be significant changes in behaviour. And that's not a problem, but I think we shouldn't take any decisions till we actually see that. I believe that because there's been a year's notice, I think we'll see that change in behaviour quite quickly. So I think we can relatively soon measure how it's working in practice and then decide if there are other actions to take. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to be absolutely clear on those that have the chalet-type properties that can't be occupied all year round. Can you just clarify for me, Katie, so that if, for example, a holiday home can be used for 200 days of the year and not for 165, they pay double council tax on the 200 days, but not on the 165, and that's when they're paying regular council tax or no? Can you just be quite clear on that one, please?
Yeah, absolutely, no problem at all. See, these are very few properties because, as mentioned, to get the Class G exemption, it is. Yeah, sorry, I think it is. It has to be prohibited in law. So therefore, we're asking for evidence of that. So somebody can't just come forward and make that statement. So just to reassure everybody who is listening today, but absolutely, your summary is correct that they will be levied and charged the council tax for the period they're in occupation. So that's absolutely fine. So the time that they are using it, it is being used as a second home during that time. So they would have the premium applied for that period of time. So they'd be paying two lots, 2 times, 200% council tax during that time. So that's what they would be paying. during the time they've got an exemption, that's a total exemption. So they're not just reducing down to the normal level of council tax, they are exempt from council tax fully for that period of time.
Perfect, thank you. Now, I've actually got a couple of recommendations here, and I will be seeing whether my lovely committee here will support this. It's unclear yet as to the exact income that this may generate for Dorset Council. And I'm wondering whether we could ask Cabinet to consider a review of this in 25-26, depending on as, when and if this goes through, that a percentage of this additional income be used to support affordable housing projects on the basis that we have reached a balanced budget before this is taken into account. That is what I am suggesting. What I am also asking for, when this report is rewritten or just adjusted or tweaked or whatever for Cabinet, it goes through as if it's only just about money. And I sort of get that. But actually, what I personally would like it to reflect is that actually this is about communities thriving. It's about our pubs, our shops and people and living as part of a community that contributes to life. And I just wonder if we could just make sure that's in so it doesn't look like we're just about the money. I will, first of all, committee, Councillor Jesperson.
I would support that, but could I, with one slightly pedantic change, given that we don't know for sure what year this is going to begin in, perhaps we could change it to, instead of saying in 2012, saying after the first 12 months, or possibly even after 2 years, to review it after 2 years or after 1 year, rather than naming a year. That's all. Other than that, I second your proposal.
Thank you. Does anybody else? Gosh. Okay, this is a formal proposal. You formally seconded it, Councillor Jesperson.
Can I just be clear? Because obviously there was a recommendation in the report which is to do with the premiums to be applied. So are we need to be clear that are you proposing the recommendation in the report with the addition of those 2 points? Yes. And that is what you're understanding that you are seconding?
Yes, thank you.
And yes, from me too. Is everybody happy with that? Jonathan, would you like to come in on that?
Chairman, I'm not sure if the slight amendment to what you were originally proposing was to 1 year or 2 years. But I think it's absolutely right to refer to 1 year, 2 year, rather than a particular named year.
Councillor Jesperson, you're suggesting so 2 years after implementation? 2 years after implementation, and only on the basis that we have a balanced budget. We're not tying the hands, we're just asking for this to be discussed. Thank you. Are we all in agreement? This item on the agenda is now finished. So we will just stop for a moment and get our lovely people who are waiting outside to come back in.
Chairman, can I just say, again, thank you for that. I will take your recommendations forward. What Cabinet and full Council agrees is up to them, but what you have suggested has my support. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Wolf, come on, off you go. Go on. In the nicest possible way, blowing your kisses as you go. Right, we're on to item 8, the consultation and engagement policy and protocol. Councillor Haynes, would you like to speak to this? Because I know you've got to dash off fairly shortly.
Thank you very much, Chairman. This is all about joining up the council. We've done quite a lot of work so far in restructuring, in getting ourselves to become a unitary council, but we still tend to do our engagement by directorate. And so Laura Cornett will take you through the paper, but actually what we really need to be doing here is we need to be organising this centrally, and we need to be looking in a slightly different way to the way that we engage with the public. You and I had this conversation earlier. We're rather good at deciding what we want to do and then say we're consulting on it. And actually what we need to be doing is we need to be taking much greater consideration in the way that we engage. And if we are going to co-produce, it needs to be from a blank sheet of paper rather than from a decision that we think of what we want to do. So Laura will be taking you through this. I hope is she here with us today in the room? I can't see her. Oh, over there. And I'm sure that she will be able to answer any further questions on how that goes. This is really much more an internal document than an external document. So this is about pulling all the threads together internally so that we become one organisation. Laura Bedlow, as you know, deals with engagement with the public externally, and that's a slightly, although this policy and strategy works through that, but there are two halves of it, and my part of it is about pulling us together as a whole council. So I hope that clarifies it a little, but Laura is the expert.
Laura, our expert, come on in.
Sure. Thank you very much. So I'm Laura Cornett. I'm the business partner for communities and partnerships. And thank you, Chair, for the opportunity to bring this paper to you today. So as a background, Dorset Council consults and engages on a wide range of topics and issues relating to the services it provides for its residents. We are and always have been committed to listening to our residents and communities when developing and shaping our services. We've always conducted both formal and informal activities across the authority and have direct and indirect conversations on a regular basis. So this process very much facilitates building a level of consistency and trust between the council and our residents going forward. So back in mid-2021, the Communication Engagement Service identified a challenge, and that is to improve engagement with our external communities and demonstrate that their voice is being heard within the council in ways which are consistent, efficient and appropriate, defining the role of the central team and its responsibilities and other teams. So this programme was delivered is being delivered as a council transformation project. And one of the main recommendations from the discovery phase of this project was the repositioned role of the central consultation engagement team, which currently consists of 2 officers within my team, to provide advice, guidance and maintain all the central systems in order to support all the other colleagues, facilitate colleagues across the council to be able to conduct high quality consultation and engagement activities themselves. This will include the development of a new policy and protocol and training materials for colleagues, which is what we're very much talking about today. I identified in 1.7 the benefits to having an agreed policy and protocol for Dorset Council. So firstly, if we can have a look at the policy, this is very much the externally facing document. So the scope is for all external consultation by Dorset Council, excluding consultation on planning applications, the local plan and traffic regulation orders. It would exclude internal consultations as this sits very much within human resources. The proposed policy laid out in Appendix 2 aims to set out some fundamental levels of principles that the consultation engagement taking place throughout Dorset Council will adopt. Both the policy and protocol have been developed with advice from using the latest guidance from the Constitution Institute to meet the objectives of the new transformation review. So moving on to the protocol, which is very much the internal document. This has been developed to ensure consistent planning and implementation of consultation activity across all parts of Dorset Council. It sets out how Dorset Council will deliver consultation, so it's not only legally compliant, but will benefit all who are involved in the process. As part of the wider consultation engagement transformation programme, the protocol also will be supported by a toolkit available to all colleagues, which will provide practical advice, templates and useful information for officers carrying out consultation engagement activity. Online learning modules are being developed by the consultation engagement team, and we will offer training and support to all staff to be able to plan and develop their own consultation and engagement activities. It's important to say here at this point that my team will always have full sign-off on any consultations that go out prior to them going live. So that was my kind of summary on them. So I'm asking members of the Place and Resources Overview Committee consider the policy and the protocol, and whether they deem it appropriate for it to be able to go on to Cabinet for full approval. Thank you.
Laura, I thought actually the way to take this is that we'll take them appendix by appendix, if that's okay. So can we take Appendix 2, which is the draft consultation engagement policy first, please? Do members want to speak to that one before we go on to Appendix 3? Jesperson?
Yes, sorry, that I don't. You have slightly thrown me because I wanted to make some particular points and then a general point. So I'm going to do that anyway. Bear with me. On the listen, you give an instruction and I ignore it. Hey, on the first document, then under the scope where you have rightly identified planning as an area that is not included within the scope. And this is a question, I don't need an answer now, but could I also mention that possibly licensing and changes to the definitive map might also be two areas that are excluded, because they also have consultations that are different from this as laid down by law. And if we're listing them, could we just check that we should perhaps be listing those two as well? My second point, which applies to this document, but also the second document, we reference 2 or 3 times in this document evidence, collecting data and our evidence, and that we're making evidence-based decisions. But I actually don't see that reflected in this document, other than as a passing reference. I don't see it reflected here to the extent that I would wish to. And so could I just, I haven't got a particular suggestion, could I just ask that we perhaps have another think about that, how we could firm that up? This is, we are in danger here of missing an opportunity to gather data. We know what we know about our residents, but there's whole swathes of information about our residents that we don't gather. And I know that we are moving as a council to be more evidence-based. So can I just leave that thought with you? My third general point, which I must raise now while I have the floor. I read this document and with great detail, because obviously, as some of you know, this reflects my own professional background, and I have to say it's an excellent document. But I have been here as a director myself, and there is it can sometimes happen in large organisations, and Dorset Council is a large organisation, that documents like this get written and get agreed, but they get then put in people's bottom drawers after a little while, because there is the view that there isn't enough resource to do it properly, and that there aren't enough people to do what the policy and the strategy requires. And the directors really quickly move back to short-circuiting the process and doing it their way, doing it more quickly, doing it better, and that the protocol then falls by the wayside for lack of resources. I see that we have 2 officers in the central team. I merely pose the question, is that enough? And are we confident that we've got enough resource in the right place to make sure that this really excellent strategy and protocol can be acted upon for the future? Because if we don't put enough heft behind it, there is a danger that it will, over time, just get lost. Thank you.
Thank you. I know Councillor Haynes is champing at the bit, so come on in.
I think it's working, yes. Sorry, I should have introduced myself properly the first time. So I'm Jill Haynes. I've got the Cabinet portfolio for corporate development and transformation. Sherry, you are so right. So you will have seen, all of you, a release that came out yesterday from Aidan about changes to officers and the way that we are going to be doing things in corporate development. This is all part of that new process. Do we have enough people in Laura's team? Maybe or maybe not. Have we got enough capacity in the council? Probably yes. There may well be the need to move some people around doing things from comms or whatever. One of the things that another paper I've got coming through fairly shortly to Cabinet is business intelligence and data, because you're absolutely right. We need to use the data. Now, that has actually been through, although a bit a while ago, this committee, right? But that paper is now coming to Cabinet, and that involves how we use that data. The data we gather from engagement, how do we put that back in, ensure it's clean data? How do we make that drive our decisions? And we're just at the early stages of this, so the slight juggle of what we're doing within corporate is about drawing all this together and actually ensuring that we are using the data that we've got, we're ensuring that it doesn't, as a policy, get shoved on the bottom shelf and forgotten about. It needs to be at the heart of everything we do. So early days, but you'll be seeing quite a bit more of this coming through in the next few days. And I'm very sorry, Chairman, but I do need to leave now.
Go. Right. Laura, would you like to come back?
Yes, I would. Thank you. I'd like to respond to Councillor Jesperson's queries. So the first point regarding licensing, my team have always supported our colleagues in licensing, most recently this time last year with a large amount of public spaces protection orders, also the local crime survey we do annually. So it's something my team are very experienced in, and we do support the colleagues there and with that. The main reason we don't support planning is because with planning, they have, obviously, every single application comes in, and those colleagues they have a different system to do that. But we also seek legal advice if there's any discrepancies with any of the individual legislation that we may have to adhere to. But have got a lot of experience for children's services, housing, and so on and so on. So moving on to number 2, as Councillor Haynes has already said, when it comes to evidence and collecting data, we are working very closely with our colleagues in data, business intelligence and data, as their policy is running alongside this one. And we will be creating a central repository which will improve accessibility to data for our colleagues. And that's right across the organisation. So it's quite an exciting piece of work that should be happening as part of a transformation over the next few months. And thank you very much for your compliments on the policy. And just to reassure you that with the purpose of this policy and protocol, new way of working, will actually take some pressure off those 2 colleagues within my team. They currently do develop pretty much all of our consultations and engagements. So by doing it this way, it's a bit more self-service for managers, and that's why I've really seen the importance of developing the toolkits and the kind of self-service model. We also are currently about to go out to procurement for a new platform, and this will enable colleagues to be able to develop their surveys themselves, whereas currently the platform we use involves things like coding and things, so you have to have quite specialist skills. So with training, many of our colleagues will be able to do it ourselves, and we have actually already trialled some options. And yeah, so it will be hopefully a much better way of working for the team and for the wider authority. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anybody else like to speak on Councillor Tarr, then Councillor Rowe?
Just to say, I read right through the report. I can't really disagree with anything that it says. I think it's an excellent report, and I look forward to it being implemented. I have similar worries to Councillor Jesperson about whether it will, but I think the will is there, and it's first class. It's just very sad that it can't apply to planning. And my parish councils will be upset that it doesn't apply to planning.
Councillor Rowe.
Thank you. I'd like to also say it's an excellent piece of work. I think it's really ambitious, and we should be ambitious, especially on consulting and engaging with the underrepresented groups. I'm really, really pleased to see that there. And I want this to work. I think it's so important for our residents to have a voice and to be heard, and really heard. So my question is just basically, I'm wondering how you will measure whether the underrepresented groups are actually engaging and responding to consultations. And if you are examining that data, whether councillors could have that data, access to it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Laura.
Thank you very much, Councillor Rowe. So we running alongside this, Equality, Diversity, Inclusion also sits within my Communities and Partnerships team, and we've been fortunate enough to secure short-term funding to run a trial project, which we're now just entering our second year of 2 years, to have an equality reference group. And this is where we're able to offer small amounts of funding to groups that represent the 9 national protected characteristics and additionally our 5 local protected characteristics that we recognise. And the aim of this group is that we engage with them over and above a standard consultation, because you are incredibly right. They are incredibly hard to reach, and we do struggle to get their voices heard. So by implementing this reference group, it enables service managers, as they're developing policy, strategy, etc., to be able to go to them to talk about it, get their views on how this may affect their communities, and then bring them back. So far it's working really, really well. So yeah, and they are feeding back to us that they are beginning to feel their voices are more heard within certain areas. We still have work to do. And regarding going forward with the demographics, with this central data repository, yes, of course, councillors will have full access to that as well. And I can't tell you now how the finished version will look, because our data colleagues will own this, but we'll be working very, very hard to make sure that it's as easy to access for everybody as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Laura, would it be all right to ask whether we could actually take this one step further and create a proper Dorset Council database of residents, not in terms of, we have so many community and voluntary organisations who often are in touch daily with the hard to reach people. And it strikes me that if you had a full database, knowing that you go to this organisation, you're going to reach exactly these people with their help and so on. Would that help if we could make a recommendation that we actually implement a full database to be set up for your use? Would that be useful?
It would be useful, though very tricky and time-consuming to maintain. We do have a citizens panel where we do have a representative group of organisation of people who meet our demographics of Dorset Council. We are also doing a lot of work with the new ICS in developing wider engagement strategies in reaching a much wider demographic of people that to respond. With the new software we are going to be procuring at the end of February, it is hoped that the packages available on the market now have a much more accessible way to respond. So rather than standard questions and answers, they both offer much more exciting ways and people are able to respond. I'm currently doing a piece of work with some colleagues in Children's Services regarding SEND, about how young people with SEND are able to access and answer questions. So it's really, really important for us to kind of broaden the response demographics that we get. But yes, it would be helpful to have a full database. We'd have to do some work as to how that could be implemented. Thank you.
Perhaps make that a recommendation before, that it's considered whether we would benefit and whether we could put together a database, making it easier for full consultations to go through the process. Would that be supported by this committee? Would anybody like to come in? I can see you nodding, Maria. Anybody else? Councillor Alford.
My sort of thinking is probably well in line with yours and the answer that Laura has just given to the point that you made. And I will be perhaps touching on that as well. I'm referring to paragraph 8 of the report rather than anything in the appendices, the equalities impact assessment. And there's some interesting things there in that paragraph. If it had been available as a background paper, I would have read the whole document because I'm sure there's a lot there of interest and relevance. We talk about hard to reach people, difficulty of communications, obtaining data, etc., etc. And all that I well understand. And what it does suggest to me is that it's a kind of bespoke treatment or a bespoke approach that is needed to these somewhat difficult groups that we want to engage with. Now, that seemed to be rather contrary to the rest of the documentation, which to my way of thinking was about consistency and uniformity. You know, all fine values in themselves, but not necessarily the ones you need where you are trying to communicate with difficult to reach people. So maybe I've got that understanding wrong, and I'll be interested to know if that is the case, but I'm just wondering whether trying one method fits all is not really an approach that's going to work.
Can I bring you back in here?
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much, Councillor Alford. And I will make sure the equality impact assessment is available for when this moves forward to Cabinet. There is a full one that has been conducted, and apologies for not including it today. So just to confirm that the we want to make sure that all council colleagues are conducting consultation engagement to a baseline standard, which is what the policy is very much aimed at. However, for our residents, we want to make options available that suit them to be able to respond to them. So some residents very much value a survey. Some would prefer a workshop, or some would prefer just a quick phone call to say, you know, with 2 or 3 different questions. Currently, most of our formal consultation is conducted through online surveys or paper copies available within our libraries and other public buildings, which does obviously encourage a certain demographic of person to reply to them, which is not wrong. But one of the things we want to do is really make sure that the wider voices are heard as well, if they so desire to give it to us. So it's really trying to find different mechanisms through the standardised approach to encourage wider members of the community to come back to us. So whether it be some of the work in children through Youth Voice and Youth Parliament, so that's one piece of work that colleagues there are doing. Working with some of our adults with learning disabilities, you know, have a very, very great points to make on many of the great opinions to have and points to make on how their lives are shaped. But however, a traditional survey is not always the best mechanism to get that out there. So it's us giving the tools to our colleagues to ensure that everybody has the ability to be able to come back to us and feedback, give their views and opinions on anything we're bringing in. But those standards on how our colleagues do that are laid out in the policy and through our corporate message to make sure it's all using the same software and everything looks the same. So something that comes from Children's will have the same standards of consultation engagement as something that comes from Place, etc. Does that clarify, Councillor Alford?
Yes, I think that's helpful. I suspect we will know better when we have the experience of seeing it in action.
Jesperson?
Yes, I was going to ask if I could add a recommendation that might address some of my concerns about this might disappear into a bottom drawer. Perhaps we could ask for a report on the effectiveness of this policy and protocol, and particularly the protocol, to come back to this committee in, I hesitate to say 12 months, but between 12 and 18 months after its initial implementation. Would that be acceptable?
Goes through to scrutiny. I think that would go to scrutiny, wouldn't it?
Then could we recommend that it goes to scrutiny? Quite right, but that it goes somewhere.
OK, Laura, it's going to scrutiny. It's not going in the bottom drawer. I did say I was going to take Appendix 2 and 3 separately, but it's all gone wrong. Did anybody have anything specifically on Appendix 3, or are we pretty much happy? I'm going to take that as read. So we've got the recommendation that we have in front of us, with the addition of going to scrutiny within, let's say, 18 months after implementation, to specifically look at whether we are being more successful in reaching the hard to reach. And can we please give consideration to creating a database of organisations that can help and assist the council in getting to those people with the different characteristics and so on, because we all know who they are and we can access them for you. Are we all happy? Yeah. Oh, we've got to have a proposer. Right, Councillor Jefferson, Councillor Plugtree, done. That's it. Marvellous. And we move on. We're now on agenda item 9, which is our natural environment, climate, ecology strategy. Let's have a look. So, Stephen, did you want to come straight in on this, or is there anybody from Cabinet, or did Ray want to come in on this first?
Thank you, Chairman. No, I'm very happy for Stephen to lead on this, and he's joined by 2 members of his team who will give adequate cover on this report.
Thank you. Team Stephen, go.
Thank you, Chair. So I'll just give a very brief sort of introduction, then I'll hand over to Carl, who will give a more detailed overview. I think it's just it's probably worth setting a bit of context that in the world of climate and environment, things are always changing. And that's not just from a climatic perspective, but it's also an environmental perspective, but it's also in terms of legislation and public awareness. And there's a whole host of, it's a moving feast, basically. And when the original strategy was first pulled together, there was always a commitment that it would be a living document and that we would seek to refresh and make sure that Dorset was absolutely at the forefront of what was happening nationally as well. So what you've got in front of you today is an articulation of that. What we were very, very keen to do was to, where we could, was to simplify things a little bit, to make sure that the links between ecology and environment and climate were strengthened. And we've been out and spoken to a lot of partners, especially in the environmental sector, about what they wanted to see in terms of strengthening and a better articulation as well of the environmental actions required. So hopefully that's come through in terms of that sort of 3-pillar approach. What that sort of simplification has done, certainly when we've been talking with partners, is that people are starting to understand their place in the system and what their contribution is going to add. It's going to, hopefully you'll get when Cole talks this through, that it's going to become a lot easier to measure and monitor what individual organisations as well as the council itself is doing in terms of those three pillars that Carl will talk through as well. So it's really been a question of keep it fresh, keep it up to date, and make sure that Dorset's right at the forefront of that. But where we can, try and simplify so that people can genuinely start to see what progress we're making, and where appropriate, we can start to hold people to account if we recognise that there are areas that perhaps aren't working as well as they could. So I think hopefully that just gives a bit of context. It's not that we're going to get into a round of just ripping up strategies every 2 years for no reason. This is a refresh, and hopefully it just, as I said, it makes sure that we are absolutely at the forefront of where we need to be in terms of showing the leadership. Just one final point as well. Quite a lot has changed in terms of how we've structured ourselves operationally during the last 8 or 9 months as well. And again, I think the strategy is helping provide some context to why we're doing what we're doing in terms of some of those operational requirements as well. So I kind of just leave it there, but that's just hopefully just to give you a little bit of context about the refresh and what we're presenting today. Thank you.
I have to say that we are extremely lucky to have a very passionate cabinet lead on this, and the steps taken already have been fantastic. Carl, which one's Carl? Hello, Carl. Did you want to come in and say anything at this point?
Just a short introduction, if that's okay, Jane. Great. Oh, thanks for having us today. I really appreciate your time. I've only been here since November, so it's really nice to meet with you. As I'm sure you remember, back in 2019, one of the council's first actions was to declare a climate and ecological emergency and then establish a cross-party executive advisory panel to gather information and make recommendations on actions. And then we adopted the first strategy in 2021 on the basis of those. That set a really clear direction for us, both to become a carbon neutral council by 2040 through an operational programme, and to become a carbon neutral county by 2050 through our facilitation programme. Ambitions to cut emissions were also front-loaded by interim targets, as shown in this trajectory here. And we're not going to restate the case for taking action today. I'm sure you all know that, and there's some great Met Office slides we can share if you want that. But it would be remiss to not note that, of course, since our adoption, the IPCC has adopted its sixth assessment report, and that goes well beyond 2014's assessment in terms of its certainty that we are responsible for warming, that we will exceed 1.5 degrees within the next 20 years on current trends, and that it will have significant impacts that threaten human health in coming decades. So if anything, now the case is stronger. But moving on, I mean, of course, since adoption, we also established it as a key focus area within our 2022 to 24 council plan, and several relevant KPIs have also been integrated into the corporate performance framework, which will be updated over time and reported to senior management. And since then, we've also seen significant progress in delivery, as reported to scrutiny biannually. Through our operational programme, the council's emissions have declined by over a quarter since 2019, meaning that we're well on track to become a carbon neutral council by 2040 if this is maintained. And this is thanks to council-wide action and a whole council approach. And we've established a project management and governance approach to support this. There's still a good way to go here and some key barriers on things like siloing and resourcing, but we will continue to strengthen how we manage, govern and embed work across the council. And refreshing this strategy will be key to help us refocus and facilitate better cross-service working in particular. Beyond the council as well, Dorset's emissions have also reduced by around a fifth between 2017 and 2020, excluding agriculture and waste. Since adopting the strategy, however, we do now have new data on agriculture and waste, which has been made nationally available. So we have more of a complete picture on the importance of those areas. These aren't available for our baseline year of 2017, but they do show us that the county's total baseline emissions fell by just over 11% between 2018 and 2020. So this does mean we're slightly off track for the county, but we won't be unique in this. Nobody has had this data until now, though our rurality does make it more acute to us to address issues like around nature and foods, which we've tried to strengthen within the strategy for that reason. And this tells us that we therefore need to catalyse our facilitation programme, working with external partners, influencing and embedding better in place and commissioning policies. And thankfully, there's some big opportunities coming up in the in the next couple of years, like the local plan and the local transport plan, to work on those. We've also started establishing means for partnership working, such as with local councils and public sector partners to influence, collaborate and share best practice as well. So again, refreshing our strategy will enable us to give better clarity and direction to this facilitation work too. Nationally, the last couple of years have also seen significant steps forward on the national policy framework. Our 2021 strategy noted much uncertainty around some key policy areas, but there's great clarity now through things like the Net Zero strategy, many other supporting detailed strategies and things like the Environment Act. And so you can see from the list there, many of those are within 2021, 22 or 23, so there's been significant action over the last couple of years on policy. This is not to say that national policy, and certainly not resourcing, is all okay now, but it has significantly progressed over that period. There are, as a result, some major milestones that are now clear, and it's important to stress that most of these are coming up in the next decade and a bit. So from scaling up heat pumps to ending the sale of gas boilers or fully decarbonising energy by 2035, etc., big changes are rapidly approaching, and that is now a lot more clearer than it was to us in 2021. So given all this, we committed to a rapid refresh of our strategy. As noted upon its adoption, it's a living document that will evolve as delivery and policy progresses, and in the last couple of years that has happened significantly. But our judgment is that most of the content of the strategy still has considerable relevance and suitability, and that's a significant testament to the work of the Executive Advisory Panel, public input and Ant's team. And the broad aims of the refresh accordingly are relatively cosmetic. We want it to be a light touch refresh, repurposing existing content rather than rewriting it from scratch, to better articulate the three pillars of climate, ecology and resilience challenges and to stress their interdependencies, to provide an updated narrative on the national policy changes and to make it shorter. The original was about 74 pages plus another 63 pages of action plans, and a lot of that was a little repetitive and capable of being condensed, so that's largely what we tried to do here. The appended draft that accordingly tries to achieve those objectives. And so over the last couple of two or 3 months, we've begun condensing the original content, keeping it linked to the findings of the advisory panel and the public input through the 2021 strategy. We've engaged internal stakeholders across many service areas to test and refine it, alongside many external partners in the environment sector. We've also reviewed the consultation report from 2021, and all of those have now thrown up a few small but helpful, pretty minor tweaks, which we'll be incorporating over the next couple of weeks with an aim for adoption by Cabinet in March. So I won't go through the detail here, but just to note, in short, there are broadly 3 challenges of climate, biodiversity loss and environmental resilience that we've tried to make clearer, 9 clear missions from energy generation to adaptation, 10 key cross-cutting levers that are critical for each mission, and 4 headline outcomes. Hopefully this is a simple enough helicopter view to clarify what we're trying to achieve. And the document is essentially in 2 halves. The first is the intro and context outlining the 3 pillars, our trajectory, key achievements so far, and the national policy setting. And then in the second half, the main substance, a series of missions, each on a single page, with a context and rationale, a single main objective and some sub-objectives. I should note some minor changes to the categorical structure from 2021. I've removed economy as a standalone category, instead weaved it through the whole document. Water similarly has been incorporated into efficiency, nature and adaptation missions, and buildings is now split across renewables, heat, efficiency and development, as they're all practically slightly different. So as noted, we'll make some slight tweaks over the next couple of weeks in response to comments, including your own. And we'll be plain Englishing as well, removing some acronyms and also hopefully making it a bit more graphical. It's quite texty, I appreciate at the moment, so sorry if that was a bit of a hard read. But please welcome your thoughts. Thanks very much.
I was actually thinking that we should take this, first of all, with the actual strategy and then mission by mission, but you'll probably just do what you want anyway, so... I'm still going to go mission by mission, though. But is there anything on the strategy? Councillor Rowe, you had your hand up first. Let's get you.
Yes, thank you. I think this is excellent. It's easy to read. It's obviously a lot of effort's gone into it. I applaud you for it. And what I really like is it's on page 88 of our paperwork, but page 21 of the document. The next steps, priority delivery, and also the page up from that, making it happen. I think that's great because you can just go to that and have a look at what's happening, what's going to happen in the future. But my comment would be about having a little bit more information. I know you want to reduce the content, but for instance, develop a local nature recovery strategy for Dorset. That's a massive piece of work, to develop a recovery strategy. I would just like to know which partners you'd be working with, whether it's Environment Agency, Natural England, and also how long will the strategy take? Because we need action. When will you be able to roll the strategy out? Just things like that. It's just a little bit more information in there would be, I think, fantastic.
Now, who would like to take this then? Stephen, go on.
Okay, thank you for that. So you're absolutely right. We've tried to condense the strategy as much as we can because we wanted it to be an accessible document, or as accessible as these type of documents can be anyway. The local nature recovery strategies are going to be a massive undertaking. Dorset Council will be the responsible body for the local nature recovery strategy. So the responsibility lies with us. But in terms of who's responsible for delivering it, you're absolutely right. It would be a multitude of partners, communities, individuals. It doesn't really reside with any one particular authority. So we might be able to draw some of that in terms of scale, but maybe without sort of going into huge amounts of detail. So I think that we can take that on board, but we will try and stick to keeping it as concise as possible. In terms of when it's going to get rolled out, it's already being rolled out in the sense that a lot of this strategy is an articulation of what's already happening, but we're just trying to put it within a framing that is easier for people to access. Now, whether that's individuals or communities, town and parish councils or partner organisations, it's just about trying to frame what those individuals and organisations are doing within an identifiable direction of travel. Absolutely take on board that there's not time to be sort of navel gazing on this and should just be constantly in strategy writing. There's a huge amount of stuff that's actually happening on the ground now, and hopefully this is it's an articulation of what people are working towards in terms of that framework.
Thank you very much. Carl, did you want to come back?
Yeah, if I could just add, I think just to add, local nature recovery strategies are a really exciting opportunity for us. I think I spent a lot of the last couple of years in Cornwall drafting theirs as a pilot, and it's a really exciting opportunity to work with many local stakeholders and have conversations that we wouldn't otherwise have. And in particular for us, one of the things I hope came through the strategy was just how important it will be to work with farmers and landowners in the future. There's of course a history of antagonism and awkwardness between many environment activists and the way in which environmental concerns are often framed and the demonisation of farmers sometimes. But nature recovery strategies will hopefully be a really good basis to start having constructive conversations with farmers and landowners about the opportunities for nature recovery and for decarbonisation too.
Councillor Tardy, do you want to make a general point? Because I'm quite anxious to get through to the missions. What do you think?
My general point is, I'm obviously fully behind the whole thing. I don't think we've had really enough time to discuss it, and I don't think we should go through every detail in this full committee. And I'm just wondering if one of our small subcommittees, multi-party jobs that we sometimes set up, could look at it separately with the officers and just run through some of the wording, because sort of detailed things that, one thing which applies to my ward, which is rural, it says make sure that half of all urban journeys are made. Well, why wide open journey. Little things like that we would perhaps jointly like to comment on and change slightly so that they actually say what they mean.
Without wanting to over-egg this, I think I'd like to support that proposal because I also have, I am slightly uncomfortable with some of the wording here. It's a fantastic story, 100% behind it, but some of the language that I'm reading in here would be more appropriate, it seems to me, in a lobbying document or an advocacy document than in a strategy document. And it's slightly overexcitable in tone. And also it strays into small p political. And actually, I don't think we should have language like that in a strategy document. If we were writing in this tone of voice to government, demanding this, that, and the thing, fabulous. But certainly there are some phrases in here which to me are politically loaded, and we have to be careful of that because while we in this room may all take the same view, it's a strategy document, not an advocacy document. So I think I would quite like to, for a small group of people, to have a little look at this. Otherwise, the danger is we roll forward these slight inelegancies or difficulties forward into year after year into future versions of this.
Can I ask Ray what his thoughts are on this, please?
I'm very happy to listen to what people are asking for and try and meet you part of the way. One thing I don't want to do is delay the work that we're doing. I think it's very important that we continue with this work. I think it's fair to say that other than Wendy Carmichael, who's the only person on this team that's not with us today, it just shows how the team is quite small in numbers, but very, very high in quality and commitment. And I have said from day one, I will not allow politics to get involved with this. So I take on board the comments regarding political issues and happy to look at that going forward. I'm happy to sort of take on a meeting with members if that's what they so require, but I just don't want to see any delay in this going through the system. And I'd have to ask Jonathan that if we decide, or if you decide to recommend us having this meeting, whether that would delay its journey to Cabinet. Perhaps Jonathan can give me an answer on that one, please. Sorry, Jonathan.
Yeah, I think it would delay its. I think it would delay its journey to Cabinet, I'm afraid. So if you were to come to that view that you did wish to have a small panel meeting, then you would be making that decision in the knowledge that this would slow a decision at Cabinet. So a balance for you.
Okay, we're in a slightly tricky situation and we don't want to hold anything up and we want to get going with this as soon as we can. Let's go through mission by mission and then perhaps at that point, Carl and Stephen, they can just sort of reword, retweak. Would that work, Ray?
Yes, Chairman, if I could come back, and I go back to something Stephen said very early on. This is a living document. So if there's bits that you're not happy with, then we can refer that back to the living document programme and deal with it as we go forward. As I say, I want to give a little bit of urgency on this because this is central to what this council does. Everything the council does is involved with the environment issues that we face going forward. And what I don't want to do is for anybody to get the impression that we're backing away from something and delaying something, because that will be the wrong message to get to the general public. Sorry to harp in on that, but you said I feel I'm quite passionate on this. Too true I am. It's taken over my life You know, I am absolutely sure that if there are, I'm perfectly happy to meet with the panel, with this committee, and discuss what they would like to see going forward changed, but I would ask you to consider seriously the document that's in front of you for today.
Thank you. And this is why you are known, Ray, as #WeLoveRay. Councillor Coombs.
Thank you, Chairman. Tony Coombs, Verwood Ward. I do note that on the Cabinet Forward Plan that this is marked as a refresh. If this was a new policy, then I think I would agree with the request for a small task and finish group to have a look at it in more detail. But we've already heard that it's a living document that is coming forward. It's a refresh. So my view would be, let's get it onto Cabinet. Let's not slow it down. But in the next refresh, that we build that in and we look at that as part of the forward rolling review of this as it goes on over time.
Councillor Alford.
Thank you. I'm on a sort of debating point about 2 ago. I'm sorry about taking you back. Some of the parishes in my ward will say, this is something that really, really interests us. How can we be involved? And I don't know the answer to that question. I wasn't even aware that there is such a thing as called a living document, something. So that's the nature of the sort of question I'm likely to get. I'd be interested to know in what ways parishes can take an interest, contribute, because they like to do that sort of thing.
Thank you. Councillor Tarr.
I'd like to second that. As a rural councillor, I think the parishes do want to know what they can do to help. And I don't want to revise anything massively. All I want to do is, on page 77, it says item 10, the green chart. It says half of urban journeys are cycled or walked. I think it should be all journeys or journeys to work. Some minor alteration to reflect rural communities also desperately need to get into places like the local town, Dorchester or whatever, and to get their shopping out there if they stop running a car or doing things which you're asking them to do. Just to look at that wording, that's what I'd be quite happy with that amendment.
That statement is a contextual remark on national government policy. That's not a statement of our own intent in this case. That is just what national government policy is in this case.
There you go. Okay. Councillor Bryan.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I'd like to pick up on something that Councillor Alford just said. We are in the process of arranging through DAPTC a meeting with the town and parish councils, and I do hope that we get better attendance this time, because every time we've tried to do this, the numbers have been remarkably low. Close on 10% actually attend the meetings, and it's such an important part going forward. I'd like to see that up to the 90%, but we are organising something. Stephen's got it in hand, and as soon as we've got some dates, I will notify everybody, all members, so that they can jolly up their town and parish councils to make sure they come and listen to what we're doing, because this has got to be a major part of the partnership going forward. We need the town and parish councils to work with us, to be our eyes, ears, mouthpieces out there talking to the public. It's a very important part of the process. So I just wanted to highlight the fact that this is something that we have on the agenda and are actually, Stephen's organising it. I'm not sure whether we've got a date yet, but I think it's close to being set in stone, if that helps, Tony.
Thank you very much. Councillor Borden.
Thank you, Councillor Borden. Thank you, Chair. As someone who has been pressing for a very long time for more on adaptation to the climate change that is going to happen and on ecology. I'm absolutely delighted to see this document. I think it's an excellent document. I think it's a great summary. I could wax lyrical on various of the details, no doubt, but I won't. Like, we've really got to take farming a bit more seriously, but, you know, difficult things. But I'm entirely with Councillor Bryan. Let's get on with it and get it to Cabinet. And, OK, things will change, but this is at last an integrated account of the three big fields, and that's great. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Starr.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to agree with that. I think while I see that there are some cases where the wording might be a little bit better, the main thing is that time is of the essence, and we've got to get on with this, and it's going in the right direction. And if it is a living document, I'm sure we can amend it as it goes along. Thank you, Chair.
I just ask whether, is it appropriate now to just go mission by mission, or are we just, where would you, Councillor Borden, would you like to come in? I'm quite happy to go mission by mission, so I've got a few points.
Yes, well, I just wanted to agree with Councillor Bryan and Councillor Heatley and others that we don't want to delay any further. But I'd also like to put in a plea, in addition to influencing and supporting the town and parish councils to get the message across, but also to work with the community groups and the community networks that are, I'll put a shout in here for the Dorset Climate Action Network, which I co-founded, because we are linking with lots of community groups to share best practice and knowledge and to support our town and parish councils in the best way we can. But if the influence comes from Dorset Council, that's going to, you know, really help us and make a step change. So, for example, I ran a home energy workshop on Saturday with the managing director of Ridgewater Energy. He came with Healthy Homes Dorset and the local energy advice partnership. And there were some really, really useful connections made at that meeting between somebody in a local church who'd been given some money to help people towards their energy bills. But we also had the Citizens Advice Bureau's energy advisor, who was the right person to be able to, so I can link those two people to say she can put the benefactor in touch with the right sort of people. But we're also going, and there was somebody came to talk about a bulk solar installation scheme, which we know that some of the other villages are doing. And it's on my wish list, but I don't have the capacity to deliver. But somebody came to that meeting who can. So it's enabling us to support those kind of initiatives, so community-based, lots of volunteers wanting to do things, but needing the support and the guidance, perhaps some policy guidance, sharing best practice and funding, dare I say it. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Right, we're going on to missions now, whether you like it or not. Yeah, we are. Right, mission 1, renewable generation. I just wondered on this whether we could work with partners to investigate using our rivers in any shape or form, because I just feel that's a bit of a wasted opportunity where we have fast-flowing water going through weirs and things. Would that be something we could consider, Carl or Stephen, going on to mission 1 or not? I'll leave it with you then. Anybody else on this mission? Uh-oh, have I thrown a curveball here?
I mean, you're absolutely right. That is part of the mix that needs to be considered. It has been looked at in the past and continues to be looked at. Economically, there are certain types of renewable energy which are more favourable, and the sort of small-scale hydro type projects tend to be on the slower side of that scale, if you like. So that's where the focus has always been around sort of things like solar and other technologies.
Yeah, just the bits where, just in the interest of keeping it concise, I've not listed various types of renewables, but by all means, I think that's perfectly fine for us to add in alternative options there.
If it could be done as a consideration, it's there then, isn't it? Okay, anybody else on mission 1? I'm moving to mission 2. Heat decarbonisation. Anybody got anything on this one? Thank you. I just wonder whether we could review the success or what's going through Healthy Homes Dorset. I don't actually know how successful that organisation is or how much they cover or whether we're hitting the mark or not. I just wonder whether that's something that even perhaps goes to scrutiny. How effective is that organisation? Councillor Borden.
Thank you. Yeah, this is one of the areas that a lot of people are wanting to do the right thing, but it's unbelievably expensive for most people. And it's a sort of area that, for example, is there a way that Dorset Council could work with the, what's the term, housing associations, registered providers, is it? To, if they were doing work on their estate, for those areas where there are people who own their own, ex-local authority housing, could there be some sort of bulk deal done so that those houses could be offered a more economical way to first insulate but then to retrofit? Because at the moment it's, I don't know, 2,000 for a gas boiler, but you're talking 6,000 for an air source heat pump, plus all the additional works and the other changes that need to be made. And it's a no-brainer. Most people can't afford that. But if there was a way of working with the housing providers so that when they're doing their work on their own properties, could there be a deal done? I don't know what kind of influence Dorset could have on that, but that's it. And again, as I said before, we're working with the communities that have some volunteers and some expertise that would like to do it but don't have the funding. Thank you.
Councillor Bryan.
A very valid point. It's all about money. And I was so pleased that, and I hate this because I'm now going to mention something political, I was so pleased that Rishi Sunak appointed a dedicated person to look at this going forward. And let me tell you, the first letter that I sent was to Grant Shapps to make sure that he's got Dorset in his mind. And I hope I beat everybody else, because I not only posted it, I sent it by email. So it would have been on his desk fairly quickly, but I'm sure he's got quite a few coming in. But I've said from word go, local taxpayers are going to find it very difficult to afford part of what we do. Councillor Walsh is going to be talking to you in a little while about the planning issues going forward, and he and I are working very closely on this to make sure we get a good voice in government. But I do think it's important, and I'll use this opportunity because perhaps the message will get through to government, that we need to find some money from somewhere to start this process, because the local residents are going to struggle to change everything that they have to comply with the 2050 rule. So believe me, I'm still banging the door.
Thank you. Sorry, what's your name? Anthony. Sorry, Anthony. Beg your pardon. Carry on.
I just wanted to add to the sort of social housing side of things. So one piece of work we have been trying to do is to work with our housing colleagues and the Southwest Net Zero Hub to support the housing providers in Dorset to sort of come together and strengthen their ask of government, so they can actually access some of the funding that is available. So there's a few of them that have already come together in a bit of a grouping to apply for some of the funds that are out there at the moment. So we're trying to help to sort of facilitate that.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, mission 2 accomplished. Mission 3, energy and water efficiency. Anybody have anything particular? No. Mission 4, road transport decarbonisation and modal shift. Oh, Councillor Tarr, you want to speak to this? Are we cycling?
Interfere anymore, but I think it's very. I have not yet seen a new estate built anywhere in the southwest of England which complies with any of these conditions that we're going to improve active travel in the area. As soon as you say you want cycleways to the local school, the developer says that costs too much, I can't do it. And all the mums take their kids to school, sometimes 100, 200 yards from their homes, in their cars, because it's not safe to cross the local roads or safe to let their kids cycle to school. And I think it just hasn't happened. So that's the only comment I've got to make about that one.
Watson. Oh,
Yes. The first point here, the accelerate vehicle charging and infrastructure deployment development. There's a real urgency to get a Dorset-wide policy against which planning committees can make these decisions. The position we are in at the moment is they come in randomly. They are often extremely vehemently opposed, sometimes for very good reasons, as recently in my own ward, by local people, because their view is that it's the right thing in the wrong place. And we are powerless to have a broader conversation in the planning committee about this. So there's an absolute urgency that we need to identify and to decide where we need these charging points and why, and not leave it to the market to unfold this as and when people who are in it to make profit see fit. And so I'm pleased to see this, but it's probably one of the things that we need to get on with most if we are to take people with us, because what's happening at the moment is we are alienating communities because we are doing this in what they perceive to be the wrong way. So we're doing the right thing for the right reason, but probably in the wrong way, in the wrong place. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I ask Carl and Stephen whether we're any closer to looking at lampposts, using lampposts for vehicle charging at all, or?
Yeah, thank you. So we've obviously secured 2.7 million for the Levi funding, which I think is going to be around about 185 charge points across Dorset. I think there's a number of rapids there as well. They'll be predominantly on sort of roadsides, and I think they're also trying to look at how they can integrate that into some village contexts as well. So there should be good support there. Currently, I know that the transport colleagues are looking at what the options might be for using lamppost charging, but I think there are some complications around the sort of getting the appropriate licensing in place, and there's a whole range of other challenges as well about the logistics of doing that. That said, there are a number of companies out there that offer those technology solutions, and at some point, I think from a more strategic perspective, we are going to have to firm up on a view on how we can look at a more integrated set of charging solutions. But currently, the focus is primarily on those arterial routes and how we can make sure people can carry on, with their en route journeys.
Okay, and as this is a living document, we wait with bated breath. Let's move on to Mission 5. Sustainable Development and Construction. Anybody like to come in on this one? Gosh, we're going to race through this. The only thing I had thought about here on this particular one is where we actually place our affordable housing, because I know certainly in the work that I do locally, we've got some people in affordable housing that are placed way out in the sticks with no public transport, and that does cause real problems. And whether we can actually lobby for changes to the NPPF to make some of these areas obligatory rather than nice to have. Does anybody else have anything on Mission 5? No? Mission 6, we're racing through. Sustainable consumption, waste and circulatory. Anybody here? I did just wonder how it actually worked with towns and parishes, with their local sort of bins that they would deal with in terms of parks and things like that. Do those items get separated? Could we encourage more separation at source, or is this something that automatically happens? I wasn't sure, but whether that's something that we could just look at. And I'm now Councillor Jesperson, then Councillor Starr.
A tiny little drafting question. In the final paragraph of here, it refers to wider Dorset. The phrase wider Dorset is used. Can I just ask for clarification? Because generally speaking, when people use the phrase wider Dorset, they mean Dorset and the conurbation. In other words, Dorset and Poole, and Dorset and Poole, Bournemouth and Christchurch. And if that's what we mean, it's not clear. Or if you mean that Dorset wide. So can we just, as a general rule, be a bit careful of that phrase, because it's usually used to mean all of Dorset, including the conurbation.
Councillor Stull.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like some clarification of what it means to become a low waste council. Is that a specific target? I understand that we're doing pretty well in that regard already, but how do we know when we become a low waste council? Thank you, Chair.
I think we're already doing pretty well with 60% recycling, but is Carl's looking eager up there.
This is in regard to our internal performance as a council. I mean, there is work that would need to be done, for instance, to audit our waste streams to have real confidence on the extent to our delivery on that sort of work. But in terms of specific KPIs towards that, I don't have that conception myself, but waste colleagues will.
Right, okay. Mission 7, sustainable food production and consumption. Would anybody like to come in here? Councillor Jesperson.
Thank you very much. Again, firstly, a drafting point here in the final paragraph. You're talking about elms. You see, thankfully, the new subsidy regime for farming will give right. There's no place for that word. Thankfully, that's a political opinion. That's officers' view on that. You're thankful that elms is coming in. This council does not have a political position on elms either way, so the word thankfully just should not be there. The sentence is perfectly well if you just describe it rather than give a view on it. That's an example of what I mean by the slightly overheated language here sometimes that does reveal the political view, you know, it goes into a lobbying language rather than a straight strategy language. My comment further is on point 4. I'm uncomfortable about the middle sentence of that, where we're saying we're going to promote the consumption of local, sustainable, green kitchen standard food for life foodstuff by households. I understand where you're coming from with this, but I do not think it is the role of a local authority to be promoting be telling households what they should buy and what they should eat. Even central government jibs at that, and I think in the current climate, that's a particularly inappropriate line to be taking. It's not for us to be telling people what they should buy and how they should feed their families. By all means, let's have a sentence in there that says we will promote local producers and farm shops and so on that want to bring this food option to the market. That is our business. But when we're saying we're going to promote the consumption, which is tantamount to telling people how they should shop, I think that's outside of our remit. And I think people will read this and find that a bit alienating, frankly, especially in the current climate. I think we've overstepped the mark a bit there.
Thank you. One area that this mission doesn't cover, but actually we do already, is that this council does support food waste in terms of supporting sort of pantry models who have fair share contracts, collect food from excess food from supermarkets at end of day and community fridges and so on and so forth. So actually we're doing quite a bit that perhaps not everybody is aware of in helping reduce food waste, because there's a lot of groups out there going to collect it daily. And in terms of item 3, again, I think we've got to bring in parish and town councils to help support more community growing. So that's something for consideration. Anybody else on Mission 7? Mission 8, natural assets and nature-based solutions. Anybody on this one? I was wondering, under item 3 there, is whether we could actually encourage all town and parish councils to have a green space champion. And actually that could, I think that might just help us with our overall mission and bringing communities together. It's an idea. Anybody else? No? Last mission. Resilience and adaptation. Anybody? Sorry, I've got something on this. In some of our areas, we know we've all got areas that flood continually, and it's always a case of, oh, highways, can you go out and jet the gullies? And I just wonder whether that's something that we could embed, that we identify, we know where these areas are, and just put a little bit of extra something in place to actually prevent the flooding that can happen in some areas. Anybody? Councillor Bryan, sorry, you're going to tell me you do this already, aren't you? Are you going to put me in my place?
Far from it, Chairman. I wouldn't dream of doing that. You have the power from the chair. It'd be remiss of me if I didn't highlight the fact that 3 years ago, I asked for a review of our hedge-to-hedge. We are now dealing with that, and that will take care of some of the things you're mentioning, because obviously we need to get to keeping the gullies clear, getting the roads swept, making the place look nice and tidy. And that's what the hedge-to-hedge will do. And I've recently requested it to be speeded up, and I've set a target date. And so you will see on the coming few months the programme coming forward for you to look at as to what we plan to do on the hedge-to-hedge review. So I just wanted to raise that, if you don't mind, Chair.
Don't mind at all, thank you. Okay. We are now on to, so we've done, have we done? Yeah, we've done mission 9. Right, we've got 2 further pages. Let's just take it page by page because I like to be thorough, making it happen. I was wondering whether here we could just have regular scrutiny updates at all, whether this should go through scrutiny at certain periods of time just to see, are we doing these things? How effective are we? Are we behind? Are we in front? Would that work, do you think, Stephen? I'm looking at you now.
Yeah, we go to scrutiny twice yearly currently to give updates, and we also have regular cabinet updates as well.
It's just one thing which isn't mentioned anywhere in the report, and it's a problem. I don't know how many villages have this, but we've got sewage flowing down our village streets because when it rains a lot, it gets into the chalk and then flows into the local sewer, which is 60 years old or something and made of asbestos. It actually is flowing down the streets. And I think this problem should be it's a very recent development, the protest against polluting our beaches and so forth, but polluting our villages should also be, it's a part of global warming, it's the excess water which is coming into the system which is probably causing it, but something should be done about that.
So I'm hoping we've got a response.
I agree. I mean, there's a lot to cram into that nature page, but I do mention outflow and runoff pollution within there. But granted, that could be slightly clearer what outflow is referring to in that case. So I'll address that. Thank you.
Thank you. And our final page, next steps. Anybody? Just on the one, deliver phase 2 of our EV charger programme. I just think we should, looking beyond that, but then this is a living document. So if everybody is happy, can we put this, Councillor Borden?
Sorry, I was just wondering, I don't know, this isn't intended as a criticism, but I'm in terms of encouraging town and parish councils to take on this whole agenda and to adopt the same mindset themselves, I personally don't think that's coming through yet. I think that the briefings through DAPTC are very, very interesting and very useful, but I think they're coming through as this is what Dorset Council is doing with its own operation, rather than this is what we should all be doing collectively. So I don't know if there's some thought can be given about kind of pushing it a little bit further to kind of encourage and support and enable.
I wonder whether, as the attendance to the DAPTC meetings are not always great. Do you think it might be apt if we could hold some sort of workshop here for all towns and parishes specifically on this agenda? Councillor Lacey-Clark.
Chairman, thank you so much for the indulgence you're giving to myself and Councillor Board and the members that aren't on the committee. I wanted to make it very clear that at the very start, when we put the first of this strategy together, we did extensive work with all the town and parish councils. And as Councillor Brian alluded to earlier, the take-up was pretty darn low. I think 10% was probably over-exaggerating how many did arrive. And so it doesn't seem the best use of Dorset Council's time when the town and councils don't want to participate with that. And the DAPTC are in the best position to try to persuade them to do so. It just doesn't seem to me like it would be a good use of the council's time.
Thank you. Councillor Tarr, then Councillor Jesperson.
I'd just like to say that whoever does all this work, I forget what you're called, but they have been sending representatives to parish council meetings, which I've attended, and they've done a very good job on explaining the whole thing and putting it over. And it's produced a very positive response. So I think it is being done to some extent. And, I know Knox involved with that sort of thing as well. So it is being done through that method, and that seems to work, to actually pick a parish council and say, what are we going to do? Yeah.
Councillor Jesperson.
I absolutely agree with that. And I was going to say there's a really important role here for ward members. I go to my parish councils and I promulgate this message, but I do it differently for each parish council because I'm sitting with them and I can see to what, and some are taking it up very enthusiastically and running with it. Others will take a little more time. I think that's ward members know their parish councils best, and we have to take that on board as yet another thing that we have to be out there promulgating in the community.
We work tirelessly to do so. Yes, that's down to us. We will go to each of our. Councillor Coombs.
Thank you. Just to add to that, Chairman, I know that my local town council look very favourably on the newsletter that we email out. And if this could be prominent on the next edition of that to show that we've looked at it, and also maybe after the Cabinet meeting, that is another way of getting the town and parish councils engaged. It's there, it's in front of them, it's got the links, it shows them exactly where they need to go to get further information.
Fine. Anthony, would you like to come in?
Sorry, thank you. So yes, this is an area of work which is sort of evolving, and we are very cognizant of the fact that there needs to be sort of more of that stuff. So there is some engagement with town and parish councils through all sorts of services that the council provide. There's various sort of briefings and things. Also, one area where we've recently made quite a few changes is in the all our web pages. So we've revamped the sort of the environment and climate web pages to be much more sort of supportive of what you can do for organisations and town and parish councils and communities. So there's information on there now where people can go and get information and links to other support as we're developing our more sort of proactive work.
We all just have to take this back to our communities and drive it home. Okay, we've thrashed this one out. If everybody is happy with the recommendation and officers have noted all the bits and pieces we've thrown in along the way, are we happy? Can we move on? Yes, thank you very much. Do members actually want to take 5 minutes before we tackle our last item? I can see some nods. Would it be, or I know you've sat there so patiently at the back, but could we just have 5 minutes for a quick comfort break? And 5 minutes, that's all you've got. Now, okay, we're back. Thank you very much indeed. We are now on to item 10, which is the Planning for Climate Change interim guidance and position statement. Once we've gone through this will be recommended to Cabinet, and then there'll be a 6-week consultation. So, David, did you want, Councillor Walsh, I beg your pardon, would you like to speak first to this?
Thank you very much, Councillor Carroll. And I would like to say, Chairman, what an absolutely brilliant meeting this has been. I've thoroughly enjoyed the subjects you've had and the debate. It's been absolutely fantastic. So thank you. I would like to add one thing to the previous one, which was the consultation on engagement policy that I hope that Laura, I know she said Laura Cornett was going to work across departments, but I hope people remember what happened with planning and that we had for the public consultation, we received more than 3 times the amount of every district local plan consultation added together by doing things through lockdown, using social media and everyone else. And we had a most fantastic lady called Frances Summer, who was the Young Planner of the Year, who was putting some brilliant consultation together. So I'm hoping people are going to work and look at that. Now, one of the things here, we had 7 members involved in planning committees previously, and John had to go, but I'll speak to him later. So this shows how important this is to this group of people. And whenever we're talking in planning committees, someone is going to say, can we make them do this? And we say, no, we cannot do that. That's got to come through the local plan. As we know, the local plan is not going to be ready until spring 2026. Things have to go through building regs and things like that. Well, now we have, and not just have it, it didn't appear. There's been some fantastic hard work with Sarah and Chris in Hillary's team and with Alison's team in conservation. There's been some great work done here, and I know you've read every word of this, but all of the things, we can't enforce people to do things, but we can talk to them, and these can be advisory position statements and saying to developers, have you looked at this? Now, my other half, I don't let her see my papers, obviously, but we're so impressed to see one of the questions was, have you looked at rainwater harvesting? That's one of the obvious things, but it's never looked at with developers. But now we're saying to applicants, this is what we want you to look at. And one of the more important things is, if you want this to be validated, this is what you will do. So we can't enforce it. We can't say, if you don't do this, you're not going to get a planning application. But we can say, this is what you need to do to show that what you've addressed with looking at climate change. And this is so valuable, so important. Now, I could go on, Chairman, for the next 2 hours. But, I mean, our professionals would rather I didn't as well. Oh, I'm being told to do it. Yeah, no. Because, as I say, we've got Sarah and Chris in Hillary's team over there. And then we're going to move over to listed buildings with Alison over here. So can I pass over now to Sarah and Chris, who've done such a great amount of work to this, and hope they realise this is appreciated. Thank you.
All this time, so please take it away.
Hi, thanks, Councillor Walsh. So just to briefly introduce the position statement and checklist. So we've identified the need for some interim guidance for decision making on planning in the interim period prior to the adoption of the new Dorset local plan. And that's including measures in reducing carbon emissions of development and sustainability and design and guidance on renewable energy proposals. Additionally, the local list was updated in October last year and now includes a requirement for a sustainability statement to accompany certain planning applications, particularly for new build development. So we've prepared the position statement, which is Appendix 1, to provide guidance on the weight that can be given to climate change in decision making and to set out what the Council expects from planning applications given current policy in the adopted plans and in national policy. So this will be a non-statutory document with the aim being to present the position based on the review of this policy rather than providing new policy in itself. And it is intended to aid consistency in decision making. So alongside the position statement, we've prepared a sustainability checklist, which is Appendix 2, and that has been prepared for completion by applicants. So we considered this to be an effective way of establishing how applicants should prepare the sustainability statements as required by the local list. And this covers various topics that relate to existing policy, setting out voluntary standards to assist in new development on the path to net zero. So just to note that the new local plan will develop new policy on matters such as energy efficiency, sustainable design, renewable energy, etc. And that will go through the full process of independent examination. And that is the correct vehicle for enabling the Council to improve sustainability credentials of new buildings and to potentially set targets beyond what's required in building regulations. And the new plan will take a holistic view of climate change, recognising the multiple factors contributing to it, including sustainable construction, good design, and flooding, environmental impacts, etc. So So due to the timetable for preparing the plan, this interim guidance will be in place to assist with decision making and give confidence to giving weight to the climate emergency over the next couple of years. And meanwhile, the local list includes the requirement for the submission of a sustainability statement, providing a good vehicle for enabling action to address climate change in relation to new buildings relatively quickly. So just briefly on the position statement itself, the first part of the position statement relates to sustainable design and construction. The checklist we've prepared is linked to this and provides a means of assessing applications on their sustainability credentials. And this, we feel, is a proactive means of encouraging best practice and maximising opportunities for addressing climate change as new development is brought forward. And it will assist in ensuring climate change is taken into consideration in the planning balance. And Chris will talk a bit more about the detail of the checklist shortly. It's intended that the checklist can be updated in parallel with the new local plan and any other relevant changes such as national policy and the Purbeck plan, for example. In terms of the position statement itself, it sets out, as you can see there, that climate change and the climate strategy that Carl has just been talking about can be given weight in decision making, that carbon neutral or the low carbon credentials of a development will be viewed positively as part of the overall planning assessment of an application, and that proposals that meet standards set out in the checklist will also be viewed positively as part of the overall planning assessment. The sustainability checklist document is a proactive way of encouraging best practice, as I said, and it will insist in ensuring that the climate emergency is taken into consideration alongside other material considerations, and that's all set out within that position statement 1. The second part of the position statement relates to renewable energy development, so standalone proposals like your solar farms, etc. And it provides guidance for applications on these proposals on the weight to be given to the benefits of such schemes in the context of the climate emergency alongside other matters such as impacts on landscape and heritage. The document itself highlights that benefits should be clearly set out by applicants and confirms that the significant public benefits of renewable energy are given considerable weight as a material consideration when balancing against harm to matters such as landscape when making decisions. The position statement also sets out how proposals falling with A or Bs and affecting designated heritage assets will be considered, as well as those falling on best and most versatile agricultural land. And the renewable energy schemes are often temporary in nature, and so position statement 2 confirms that the lifetime of a proposed development will be a material consideration in decision making, balanced with a scheme's proposed benefits and potential impacts. So it's intended that the position statement will assist decision makers in their consideration of proposals for such schemes by providing a review of relevant policy and providing guidance in relation to the key issues mentioned above. And this should assist the council in making clear and consistent planning decisions in relation to these and help avoid delay. So Chris is just going to go through a little bit on the checklist.
Thanks, Sarah. As Sarah's outlined, really, the aim of the checklist is that it accompanies an applicant's sustainability statement to be submitted with a planning application for mainly new buildings, including new dwellings. It gives guidance and sets out best practice targets for things like energy efficiency of buildings, using sustainable materials, dealing with waste, conserving water, elements of green infrastructure, and sustainable drainage. The idea is that an applicant would complete the checklist stating whether or not they've met the best practice target and how they've done that, or if not, why they haven't. This will then enable decision makers to review and consider these issues in one place, and it will place an emphasis on climate change measures for applicants. The criteria in the checklist, it all hangs basically on various existing adopted policies, since they generally aim to encourage sustainable design and construction, including energy efficiency, but albeit they don't necessarily set out targets specifically or up-to-date targets. So in a lot of instances, the checklist includes targets that go beyond the policy requirements in order to encourage that best practice. Some other points to note. So other issues which are related to sustainability, such as transport, EV charging, flood risk and biodiversity, they're not included in the checklist specifically because the regulations, adopted policies and information requirements are considered to quite robustly cover these issues. Another point is, I think Sarah might have noted, is that we're aiming to have the checklist added to the local list alongside the sustainability statement requirement, and that will mean that we make sure that applicants do complete the checklist for planning applications. And a point to emphasise, I know David's mentioned this, is that targets for energy efficiency, renewable energy, etc., they're presented in the checklist as best practice guidance, not policy. Therefore, they can't be insisted upon. But as mentioned, the sustainability credentials set out by a developer or an applicant will be viewed positively as part of an overall planning assessment of a proposal. So just some next steps now. So in terms of the position statement and checklist, so we've been receiving feedback from other organisations as we move through this. So we've got some feedback from the two AONB teams, largely focused on the national policy test for major development in AONBs. So we do have some amendments to make to the documents, essentially, before Cabinet, but they are likely to be minor amendments. The Southwest Net Zero Hub have commented on the checklist for us kindly, so we're going to look at that, them being experts in that field, really. And we've had some good engagement with our development management colleagues. So a couple of points on that. We're exploring what information requirements we can specify in relation to the issue of grid connection and viability for renewable energy proposals. And we're also looking at covering off the sustainability impacts of replacement buildings versus refurbishing, which is a point they specifically raised. So that's something we're going to be looking at. And finally, regarding the recommended consultation, we're proposing a 6-week consultation following Cabinet, and this will include a request for comments regarding the addition of the sustainability checklist to the local list. Thank you.
What I was hoping to do, and I'd like you to come along with me on this, is deal with Appendix 1 to start with, but that's broken into 3 parts. So one, the interim guidance and position statement, then sustainable design and construction, then renewable energy development. And can we just deal with the checklist next? Is that all right? I'm hoping so. Councillor Coombs, you wanted to speak, but, you know, just do your own thing, really.
Like one or two other people in this chamber, I generally do. I will start off with a checklist then. I'm going to welcome this document, and I actually support the detail in the checklist. I thought it was very thorough, it's very easy to follow, and it would be a great help to applicants as they move forward. But can I sort of move it on for that? Because I don't really want to keep coming back on each section. I'd rather just speak once. As many people here will know, I chair the Eastern Area Planning Committee, so this is sort of right up my street, as they say. I really welcome the opportunity that the planning committees will get the opportunity to road test this before it becomes part of our new local plan. And therefore that will help embed and also gives the best possible way of ensuring that when we have the new local plan, that it's fit for purpose. The one thing that I get meeting after meeting after meeting from the members on my committee is how can we insist on all of these types of actions? And we can't at the moment because we don't have a policy to base it on, therefore it's not a material planning consideration, yada, 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 yada. So, brilliant. I'm really pleased to see this coming forward. But I do have a couple of queries and also a question. I'll do the question first, and that's about training, both for members of the planning committee, because it will be a material consideration. So therefore, will that be mandatory or voluntary? My view is it should be mandatory because it is planning training. But also, as on the previous reports, town and parish councils, because they all look at planning applications on their way through the process, and I think they would also appreciate an understanding and a briefing on something like this. And because it's planning, I think you might get a better buy-in than maybe some of the other issues. So that's the first point. The second point is conflict with the new building regs, because at the moment we've had new building regs that came into force last June, and we have planning consents that hadn't been enacted, and you end up with a potential conflict of what's required by building regs, which may mean an alteration to an existing planning consent. So again, my question there is about conflict and coterminosity, to make sure that we do have, you know, things working in tandem so that we don't have that sort of issue coming forward. And then I suppose my killer question is viability. The one thing that we get time and time again at planning committee is developers coming back and going, when we agreed it was this, and now we've done all the math and, sorry, American term, maths, and that the project is now no longer as viable as we thought, and therefore we want to reduce our affordable housing contribution. And every time you get something, it's the affordable housing contribution at the end is the one that gets squeezed. So my question is, great, but what I don't want it to do is to end up being so expensive that it affects our delivery of affordable housing. So that's my killer question, and that's me done. Thank you, Chairman.
I think those are all great points. Now, who would like to pick this up? David.
Thank you very much, Sharon. Great questions. But it's been good debate all day. With regards to the planning training, yes, it will be mandatory for all planning members. It must be. And we checked in the Constitution, and planning training is mandatory for planning committee members. We're also going to go out to all members, because this is so important. I want members to be able to go along to their parish councils, and where there's questions arising, to give them the correct answer. And what's most important here is, with that, I will send a briefing note. The briefing note will go out to the local member and to the clerk. There will be no chance for uncertainty or for people just not getting the gist of what's going on. With regards to briefings, there are going to be briefings for members, as I've just said, and members of the public. We have been holding, through planning, meetings with the town and parish councils where we're updating them on all issues of planning aspects. We can do it there. But also, from what Councillor Lacey-Clark was talking about earlier, about the attendance not being so great for some of these sessions, I think we should join the sessions. I mean, if we can do it for a longer period, then let's have maybe a subject they don't all come to, followed by a subject they all do come to. So let's mix up planning with everything else, because I want to get face to face. I want to glare at people again. I want to make sure people are listening. And this is the best way that we can deal with this. We talk. We all know that what we're missing is when you come to a meeting, even like this, the time that you have for talking is before and after that meeting. All you do at the meeting is go through the agenda. We need those times where we can discuss with other people, including town and parish councils, what is going on. They're the times for talking. And they're the times for giving private briefings. And as I've said to anybody, if they want to know more about what we're doing in planning, ask me for a meeting. We'll have a meeting. But I think that covered all of the things that you brought up there, Tony. Viability. Viability is a good one, and that is coming through now through the MPPF consultation documents and through the Levelling Up and Regeneration Bill. They're things they're talking about. They're actually talking in government about removing the land cost from the equation of viability, because too many times they're saying, oh, the land costs that much. The best thing to come back and say on that is, well, you knew the price of that when you bought it. So that should not be part of the equation. You should not be able to get away with affordable housing because of that. So government are seeing, and the best things, if you've looked through the regeneration bill, the best things are government are now realising that the issues with housing and the supply is not down to the local authority. They've finally realised, this coming from Mr Gove, that local authorities don't build houses, we give housing permissions. The fact that they're not built out, and some of this is very, very complicated because a developer needs basically a 10-year business plan to show the bank. So they are hanging on to some areas to say, yes, we've got that area, we've got that area. But Mr Gove, and he said this through recent letters, he is very well aware that developers are one of the reasons for the constraint in delivering houses. So we're not being blamed for it. They are actually seeing now what we've been shouting about for so long. And one of the good things is, and not blowing Ray's mind trumpet too much, that planning and highways here, Ray and I, are the ones invited up to select committees in Parliament because they want to hear what is going on in Dorset because we've been so loud and they're listening to us. So yes, so those viability issues are being looked at as well. So thank you.
Thank you. That was great. Councillor Apothecary, you want to come in next?
Thank you. I must say that was absolute music to my ears, Councillor Walsh. This is just really, it's a question, and my understanding of what we're looking at here. Could you confirm that this is a formal supplementary planning document rather than an advisory guidance statement?
No, I can't, but over to Sarah on that one, I think.
It's not a supplementary planning document. It's guidance. It's a guidance document, a position statement based on our current adopted policy. We will be reviewing the actual policy in the new local plan, and a supplementary planning document needs to hang off existing policy, and it does take a longer process to do that. So we felt this was the sort of most effective way of getting something done now in that interim period until the local plan comes through.
Thank you very much for that clarification. It's obviously going to be assessed like everything else that we assess when we're looking at a planning application. It's just the weight I think I was after. How much weight will it be given against all the other constraints for an applicant?
Chairman, if I can come into that one, sorry. I mean, one of the things that we're talking about, when we're putting out these statements that the applicant has to fill in, they're required to fill this in. Have you done this? If not, why not? If you are doing this, how are you doing this? Now, one of the things we're going out to consultation on this, if Cabinet agree. Now, that's going to go out to developers and agents and that as well. So they're going to know what's coming forward. This isn't going to be a shock to them. So whereas you're saying how much weight can we give this as to how can we force them to do this, that isn't going to be the situation with this. They're going to know what's coming because we're telling them what Dorset Council want. This is the first time we've actually been able to say, because you look at things, and I've been saying this so many times, developers, they're planning for about 4 or 5 years. Then they'll come along with you with a plan for something. And you go, no, that was never what we wanted. This is the chance for Dorset Council to speak to developers, agents, communities, everybody, to say this is what we want and this is what we require to be within that. And that's coming from Rays and Stevens, all of this climate emergency. They're fully aware of this. When we go out to consultation, it's going to look pretty shameful if when we publish this thing, we've got developers out there going, huh, don't give a damn. So yes, let's shame them into it. No, we're going to be able to use this, but it's going to be them coming to us with saying we're going to use this to mitigate it, we're going to use that to mitigate it, as opposed to us saying we're forcing you to do that. They know what Dorset Council is requiring.
So that I just enjoy reading the part where planning committee members actually can now give weight because it wasn't anything we were able to do. So, and very often, Sherry, our Northern Chair, will confirm that we're always asking, well, what weight can we give to this as against that? Does this carry more weight or less weight? So this is very welcome. Who was next? Councillor Jesperson.
Yes, thank you very much indeed. And you're absolutely right. I really, really welcome this document. It is the issue that comes up at every single planning committee, I think I can safely say, is why can we not insist, why can we not demand more sustainable development, sustainable in the widest terms? And the answer comes back, because we can't. And this is really, really helpful, because it takes us one step further to being able to evaluate how sustainable the development that's being presented to us on the committee is. So this is really, really welcome stuff, welcome work. What I would like to say is that I would hope that then in due course, there will be, we have on our case officers' reports and recommendations documents that we read, there is already a section at the front on sustainability, and that's very helpful. What I would like to see is either that section beefed up, if I can put it that way now, to reflect this, so that committee members are really, really clear and don't have to second guess, or don't have to go back to the checklist every time to see what's covered and what's not. And we also want to see in these reports the why not. So not just did they do this, no they didn't, but why not? Because that's what's going to help us make a judgment about whether we think their reasons for not doing it is acceptable or not. So can we see some changes, please, in the officers' reports that recommend? I don't want to make more work for officers' reports. I know that the objective is to make them simpler. So you can find a simple way of presenting this to us, but we do need to see that. I do have a question now, which I'm asking on behalf of all the people that ask me this question. I get told time and again by developers and by people in the community and by parish councils, and they say to me, when I say the reason we don't enforce more sustainable development is because we don't have policy to back it, and therefore we can't insist on it. To which the reply comes loud and long and often, well, other councils do. Other councils do, including Bournemouth and Poole and Christchurch Council. Can I have some assurance that there isn't something else even more firm than this that other councils are accessing, that we are doing everything we possibly can so that when people say that to me and cite other councils that do more than we do, I can confidently say that that's not the case. We are doing as much as we possibly can, and there are not other councils who are taking a firmer line on this than we are. Thank you.
Right. Oh, David, I see you're champing to come in.
Thank you, Sherry. One of my biggest bugbears, and something I'm always having a go at government for, is what is meant by sustainable development. There are so many definitions out there. One thing people have got to worry about is that without a 5-year housing land supply in some of our areas, our starting point is presumption in favour of sustainable development. So it's a case of be careful what you wish for. But I would say to these people, there isn't anything more solid in any other areas, unless they've got a local plan adopted. Our local plan will be adopted in spring 2026. Until then, we're still using the previously adopted area local plans. They still have weight. But then again, that's another bugbear I've got. And even in a planning committee, when you're talking about how much weight you can give something, what on earth does that mean? Not a lot of people know that, and it's very hard to explain. But I totally do agree with you, and I'll continue championing this with government, but we do need to be able to use something stronger, and at present, it's fantastic. When I first saw what Sarah came up with, and Sarah and Chris, oh, this is brilliant. This is a huge, huge, huge step forward. And if any developer's going to say we're not going to bother doing that, well, you said the question, if you're not going to do that, why not? That's on the checklist. If you're not going to rainwater harvest, why not? And that's a great thing to have. And if that doesn't shame people into actually doing it, then God knows what will. I see you had another question coming.
Yes, supplementary to that. So, yes, so it all hangs on our local plans. So Is there something we could do with neighbourhood plans in the interim? Can neighbourhood plans incorporate some of this as their policies? Because that policy will then have more weight than our local plan. And if so, are we helping them to do this?
I don't want to get in trouble here, so I'm going to pass this on to Hilary in a second, so I'm giving her warning. One of the things that's also coming up in the Levelling Up and Regeneration Bill and the NPPF consultation is they're talking about neighbourhood plans having weight for 5 years as opposed to 2 years. So government are looking to give neighbourhood plans more weight. And as you know, in Dorset, we have so many neighbourhood plans. Our communities have been fantastic. But on that note, that's enough warning, Hilary. I'm coming over to you.
Come in, Hilary.
And thank you, my colleague, for getting my mic to work. I pressed the wrong button. Just to say, quite a few neighbourhood plans have included policies on this, but the examiners have sometimes watered down a bit what they can actually do. I mean, Bridport was one example where they tried to be quite ambitious with it, but they weren't able to go as far as they hoped. So we certainly know that a lot of neighbourhood plans want to include it, but we need to be a bit realistic about what they can put in them. I think the more ambitious policy needs to come through the local plan, but obviously that's what we're hoping to do.
Very much. Now, would anybody else like to speak to Councillor Tarr?
To make one, well, it's a question, perhaps Hilary could answer it. The checklist doesn't include, it very vaguely refers to sustainable travel. Two words at the end of one sentence on page 96 or something. I think sustainable travel should have a major part to play in the discussions when these things happen, whether it happens or not. I think it should be discussed and should be one of the things on the checklist with an explanation of what our policy is about active travel. Because if active travel starts from a new development, it probably goes on through the county and actually will save us a lot of money. It's lovely to imagine that we'll all buy electric cars and have them charged and be charges everywhere and things, but we should be thinking about alternative active travel, keeping people healthy, walking to work, cycling to work, all that sort of thing. And I think it should go into our planning policies at the same time as in our sustainability policies, which we discussed earlier on.
Hilary's looking perplexed at the moment. Would somebody... Is it feasible to... Yes, come on in.
If I can jump in the interim, it does actually mention in the papers that there are some reasons why we haven't included aspects like transport and that, because they have their own policies. We can give reference from our policy document to their policy documents, but it seems a bit pointless repeating something in another document. There is a reason, and if Sarah and Chris could say if I'm correct, that we said these policies are addressed in other areas. Is that right, Sarah?
Yeah, I'll take this one, David. Yeah, I mean, they are broadly addressed in other areas and other policies. I think the local transport plan will sort of look at that as well. And I think moving towards a Dorset Council local plan, then the policies within that will be more robust potentially in terms of that sustainable travel notion. Yeah.
Would anybody else like to cover anything within either this or the checklist, or do you feel you've given it a jolly good thrashing? Okay, thrashing. Oh, Councillor Borden.
Thanks. Yeah, I think I'd just like to follow up on that suggestion of at least referencing to active travel being included in another policy. I think it would be quite good just, to have that guidance so that people do know that they need to be thinking about it, because it's too easy for planning, town and parish planning committees to say, oh no, that's not us, or that's too difficult, or we don't have to consider it. But if the checklist does include it, even if it doesn't include the detail, just referencing, I think it would be a good idea.
You'll be pleased to know I saw nods in the back row, so we can take that as taken on board. Shall we move over now and have a presentation from Alison on the... Oh, do you know what? We're having such a great time. We don't know where time goes. It's flying, and now we're going to probably have to extend our meeting a little bit. Proposed, thank you. Seconded, perfect. We can carry on then, because we're not stopping. We're moving on now to the area for the listed building consent. So, Alison, David, would you like to speak to this first? Go on then. Go on then.
Thank you. Because this is one of my passions, and we're in Dorset. We're surrounded by listed buildings and people in our communities that want a listed building. Now, I'd just like to say that people take on these buildings with architectural or historical interest. They become guardians. You don't buy one of these houses and want to turn it into a wimpy home. And I find this quite frustrating. So we must talk to these people, because they come to us first, they come to me, and there'd be no budget issue if every time someone said to me, a member of the public or a member of the council, David, Conservation are blocking this. If I had £1 for every one of those, there'd be no budget issue at all. Conservation are not blocking. If you read, I hope you all read the listed building document in here, because it was fantastic. One of the things people don't realise, when you buy these homes, they're not built like brick, wimpy Persimmons homes. They're actually breathable walls with these houses and that. They need to be able to breathe. You can't put that render on it because it's not permeable. It will damage it. What people don't seem to realise is that Conservation are advising them how best to look after what they've just bought, not how to trash it. So can we all just be champions for listed buildings and those people that own them, that buy them, and tell them where the information is? Everything that we've done today, please point out those documents, please. Alison.
Not sure whether I need to say much after that. I'll just say a few things to put a bit of context. So this really is the final part of today's meeting, and I think they all fit together very well. And I know that Mike Garrity, as Head of Planning, would have liked to have been here, but he was very keen that the documents that Sarah and Chris have so well spoken to and the work that Stephen and his team have been doing were all considered as one part of a big jigsaw and not lots of separate bits. So really this is the final bit, and I know you've had a long session, so we'll aim to be fairly quick. And I haven't got any slides, and as David says, I'm hoping that you've read the document. To follow on from what David was saying, where we've got sites of special scientific interest that are our natural jewels in the crown of our countryside, our listed buildings and conservation areas are the built heritage equivalent, and as David says, people living in them are really the same way as people owning SSSIs, the guardians and custodians of those. One of the things that was coming through in the town and parish council meetings that we had last year was to try and get some more relevant advice on what people could do for listed buildings. So this document, really, the aim is to provide guidance on what can be done for climate change in listed buildings. Listed buildings are only about 1.5% of our housing stock, and I do think it's quite important to keep that context in mind. Dorset Council has got a statutory duty, and I've written this down so I don't forget it and get it wrong, to have special regard to the desirability of preserving listed buildings and features of special architectural or historic interest. And that duty requires the Council to objectively assess the impacts of proposals on the significance of listed buildings through national and local policy. So this document, again, it's not deviating from our current national and local policy. The National Planning Policy framework requires that when any proposals are being looked at, that we give great weight to the conservation of those assets. So the aim of this document really is to try and be proactive and regarding proposals that can be undertaken. So it's got various sections. It indicates what works you can do without requiring listed building consent, what works that do require listed building consent, and where there are things that are maybe not in line with national policy, that in the first instance somebody has a conversation with a conservation officer to look at what can be done. At the moment, there's one case study in there, which is of Athelhampton House, which one of the members of the conservation team was involved in working with planning officers on various applications for. And there they've managed to incorporate ground and air source heat pumps and PV panels within their land holding in a way that is not negatively impacting on the listed building and the registered park and garden. I'm also working with members of Stephen's team, including Anthony, on a second case study, which is looking at Durlston Castle, which is Dorset Council owned, and looking at how various measures have been incorporated within that. So really, we are aiming to, wherever possible, be proactive and look at what can be achieved and look for solutions that will be in line with that delicate balance of preserving and conserving our historic built heritage for generations to come. Longer term, we want this to be on the website so that it's available for members of the public to read prior to making applications. And I'm sorry it's not as nicely presented as Stephen's document for this purposes at the moment, but obviously we will be improving that before it goes on the website. And I just wanted to say, we've also, Stephen March was here earlier, and we do work quite closely with other parts of the council. He's working on empty properties, and we've successfully been working on 2 empty properties, I think one in Blandford and one in Gold Hill, where they've managed to compulsorily purchase them, get them into new ownership, and then the conservation officers are working with the new owners to try and get them back into a good condition. So again, that's another part of how we're working sort of across different bits of the council. I think that's more than enough from me. Thank you. Sorry.
The checklist is just so useful. That's so good. And it will be great to have that on the website. Would anybody... Right, Councillor Jesperson.
Yes, first of all, I don't want to prolong this, but I really, really welcome this document. Thank you very much indeed. It's excellent. I love the fact that you've pitched it in terms of what you can do, not what you can't do. And I do agree with you that there is a tendency for people to see conservation as blockers, whereas I certainly, as the owner of a listed building, see the conservation team at Dorset Council as absolute heroes who are there to conserve the very things that we've all bought into. So absolutely. On the tree presentation that we had yesterday or the day before, reference was made, I think by Tony, to a document that used to exist in East Dorset that said buying a tree with a house in the garden. When I first bought my listed building, more years ago than I can care to remember, there was lots of documents that just came my way, explaining to me the whole context of what I had, not that you just bought a listed building, here's 12 things you can't do without permission. It wasn't that kind of document. It gave the whole story of how it came to be, how they came to be a listed building and why and what club, as it were, you just joined by buying a listed building. It was very positively pitched. I would like to see Dorset Council do something similar, where we're saying to the people who've just bought a listed building, this is what you've just bought into. And there's lots of help available, but actually, when you took this decision, this is the club you decided to join, and pitch it in a very positive way, with this as being part of that, because I think then people would feel much less negative about the conservation approach, because we would have introduced the notion of conservation before it became something that blocked them from building their extension or replacing their windows with UPVC. So a fabulous document. Thank you very much. More, please.
Thank you very much. Alison, do you think that we could look at producing something like a welcome to your new listed home?
It's something we've been thinking about. Being fairly honest about the last couple of years with getting through the processes and the restructure and MasterGov all onto one system, we've been doing a lot, and also recruitment. So we haven't really had the capacity in the team up till now. At the moment, I'm recruiting for one more officer. If we can get the full team, it's definitely on the list that it's something I would like to do. And I would like to try and have something that we could maybe make available for estate agents so that really people could be looking at getting that information before they've even bought the listed building. And in a lot of cases, somebody comes, and a lot of them, it is really difficult because sometimes people are in difficult circumstances and they'll say, you know, I'm very elderly and I need a stair lift or I need adaptations. And sometimes they have bought the house not actually realising what is and isn't possible. And it would be really good if we could actually do some work with estate agents so that they are able to provide this information in a bit more detail to people prior to moving in. So yes, it's not going to happen immediately, but I do think it is a very good idea and I will look into that.
No, then in which case, Councillor Borden.
Thank you, and thank you for this amazing work. It's really, really exciting, actually. I'm curious, I think somebody said that, did you say that it was only 1.5% of buildings in Dorset? Because Lyme Regis is actually 40% in either in the conservation area or listed buildings. I don't know how the listed relates, what the percentage is, but and yes, following on from Councillor Jesperson, there are a lot of people that are in buildings that, you know, perhaps they don't know how to maintain in the right ways and are quite fearful of it. So I think all this positive advice is really good because, yeah, they genuinely can't afford to do some of the work they think they need to do. So thank you, and I'm very excited about this.
Thank you very much. We've given this a good going over. So is everybody happy that we pass the recommendation as shown? Oh, so I beg your pardon, Councillor Brenton, I didn't see you up there. Do come in.
Oh, okay. It needed a tweak. Sorry. Can I just ask, I've just scrolled through and there's no mention of thatch. And I have issues with thatched listed properties, or I have had in the past, not personally. And it's that element of where if the material that was originally put on the roof is no longer available, because what with climate change and such like, long growth straw is very rarely available in the same way as it used to be. And are we being adaptable, approachable on using alternate thatching material? Because many listed houses over the years have been rethatched with a different material because the original one wasn't available. And so you have sort of party-coloured roofs. And it's been mentioned by many thatchers that I talked to that it's not actually the material they use so much as the style of the thatching that is what sets a criteria, you know, sort of the Dorset style and the Wiltshire style. And it's the style that affects the view from outside rather than actually the material. And in future, we may not be able to get hold of some of these materials. That's a question, I think.
Come on in with this.
We haven't explicitly referred to it. I am aware of that it is an issue when you're looking at either water reed or comb wheat reed. Some years are better than others. Some thatchers have access to materials and are... I'm not going to give you a direct answer now because it is quite complicated, but I'm certainly happy to look into it. Because when I first took on this role, there was a lot of interest in the thatch and there were lots of issues. It's been quieter the last year or two. So I would like to get a bit more up to date, and maybe it would be, if you've got some contacts with some local thatchers, it would be useful to actually get an assessment of where we're at with that, and also have a discussion with Historic England in terms of what we want to be doing in the future, because I agree it's the same with looking at what species of trees people are planting, we need to be making sure that we are thinking ahead to the future and making sure we're preparing for that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. In which case, let's just move to the recommendation. Is everybody happy that this is put forward through to Cabinet? Yes, yes, yes. Thank you. Oh, we're on the home run now, everybody. We're on item 11, our forward plan. We don't seem to have an awful lot on our forward plan. And I would just like to ask the committee if they could give some thought to perhaps areas of policy that they might like us to review or look into. If you can come up with anything, please pass it through and let's add to our workload. Okay, thank you. That's noted. 12. The Cabinet Forward Plan, we've gone through, right, the Cabinet Forward Plan looks to be quite busy. Anybody got anything on the Cabinet Forward Plan? No, lovely. Item 12, urgent items. You'll be pleased to know there aren't any. We have no exempt business. So I declare this meeting closed at nearly 1:15, and thank you so much.